This is Atomic Shinobi and today I'm going to narrate second and final part of what if Naruto was trapped for 4000 years in hell. If you enjoy this video, please like, share and subscribe to this channel. Now wasting no more time, let's start the story.
They looked at the city with a hunger for its blood, and they had one thing in common: long canines that reached past their bottom lips. As the female moaned and the male retaliated by calling back, the figure said, "No, my YY children. We must wait patiently for the sun to finish setting, then we may begin our hunt, and you may feast." Why do we have to wait? Even if the Dobi had all this time to gain strength, he still couldn't defeat us because he was the weakest when he was alive. As the black wraith gestured and a ring of fire encircled his neck, the figure fell to the ground, and the girl snarled at him while attempting to remove the fire from the male. "You'll wait since I say so, you wretched corpses. I was picked for this. I will get the respect I demand from my servants, and I have a score to settle with this demon. Go now and pout in your corner until you are called upon." As they followed instructions, the two fledglings glared at the man and vowed to murder the wretched creature before their time was up. In the tower, with Naruto gone all day and the darkest suspicion that he would be in trouble right now, Raven sat in the operations room reading a book from the set she had purchased at the store. She shrugged and returned to the book, which told the story of a demon and a sorceress who enchanted him, and started making plans. In the slums of New York, gazing up at the room, Naruto noticed big men pounding punching bags everywhere. The smell made him wince. This place smelled of testosterone, sweat, and shallow pride. He looked around until a big man used an uppercut to punch a smaller one out of a ring. As he watched the man approach a barrel, take out a bottle of water, and toss a towel to the vanquished man, he thought, "I'll bet my pocket watch that's my guy. You need to clean up, Shark. Your fight was pitiful." He thought the man was Hammer, but he looked up with a smile that turned his already dark skin pale brown. "I have gotten better hits from my grandmother. She was a better grappler than you," the man known as Shark said, lowering his head as the others laughed at him until the room fell silent and everyone saw the blonde standing in the doorway. As Naruto smiled, Hammer remarked, "Hey kid, Little Tyke's karate is down the street. Take a left and you will find it." Hammer gave the blonde a startled look and snorted, saying, "That's nice of you, but I am here to pick up the payment you owe Mr. Kingpin for this month, and I am kind of in a hurry." "You were sent by Fisk. When a poor guy thinks he will give you his money, the boys grab him and show him how to leave a room in the Bronx." As Naruto was flung headfirst out of the limousine and into a cluster of garbage cans, the driver was leaning against the hood and reading a magazine. After pulling himself up, Naruto threw away the lid of a trash can that had been destroyed and turned to see an 80-year-old man holding a garbage bag and observing his trash cans with concern before turning to face the blonde who had destroyed them. As the man put away his trash and walked on his porch to watch the show, Naruto said, "Sorry," slapping the inside of them to return the metal to its normal shape. He knew that Hammer wasn't going to pay, was he? Naruto approached the driver and asked him. He knew that Hammer wasn't going to pay, was he? The man nodded, turned to a new page, and resumed reading. Naruto snarled, threw his suit jacket onto the car, and rolled up his shirt sleeves before returning to the gym. "He's back, boss. Do you want to let him fly once more?" As he was officiating a game, Hammer waved to them. However, he heard two thuds and turned around to see the blonde popping his fingers and two of his boys on the ground. "Mr. Hammer, I believe I mentioned that I was pressed for time." He snapped again and the blonde was surrounded by a group of grapplers. Hammer wondered where Kingpin got this kid. "Now pay up or you can join them." Without wasting any time, Naruto started punching furiously, knocking out each man with a single blow. The most spectacular man ducked the blow, but Naruto grabbed him by his wife beater and threw him into a group of 10, where he was struck. After the kid had wiped the floor with all 20.2 of the Bronx's toughest fighters, Hammer took the money from his leather jacket by the door and threw the envelope to the kid who had left Hammer to clean up his mess. Hammer looked at the kid in utter terror. A number of city sectors away, he must have the blonde's services, or the other crime lords would undoubtedly hear, or the villains in Gotham would come looking for him, and he would lose a piece that would be a rook in this chess game of power. Fisk watched this with delight. The boy was exceptional. He pulled no punches, but stopped them just short of lethal power. He would speak to the blonde after he had had some time to rest, and then they could reach a mutually beneficial agreement. Helicopter, heading southwest. It was the damn negotiating, the fucking torture, the fact that one of the parties had the mindset to simply be pointed in the right direction and cause general mayhem, and Naruto was too exhausted to deliver the money in person. Togashan had done it. Naruto was sitting in one of the Kingpin's very comfortable choppers. As they were landing at the airport, he thought, "Oh well, at least the flight is nice." He looked at the receipt for his services that the secretary had given him, which was full of zeros. He would use it to buy something he had been considering but had never done. Now there was no reason not to. Raven will probably not be very happy with me when I tell her what I have planned for this, but it was going to happen sooner or later. At least I hoped she knew it would. With the Naruto brigade killed. Sasuke-kun, I can smell him in that metal bird. All you have to do is shoot it down so we can eat at last. As their summoner watched from a cave a little higher up, the Uchiha grinned and made hand seals, claiming that he needed something before facing the death dog, whoever the hell that was. Kaden. Jutsu no Ryuka. He said that the metal bird had already left as a huge stream of fire rushed in Naruto's direction as he was making his way to a building. A flash of light in the distance caused Naruto to stop, and he instantly pushed the idea from his mind. Naruto didn't finish his thought before the ground behind him exploded, sending him skidding forwards and flipping to regain his balance before turning to face the hill and seeing something that made him wish he had used larger chains. No way in hell that's what I think it is, I just need a nice long shower. He gulped as they smiled and charged down to where he stood, the ground ablaze around him. There stood Sasuke Uchiha and Sakura Haruno, two of the most obnoxious pains in the ass he had ever had the misfortune to deal with, and worse, they were using ninja techniques when he lost that ability with his death. As the two paused at the edge of the ring of fire and grinned while speaking to him, Naruto remarked, "Well, that little job for Kingpin did just kind of itch that scratch I needed to kill something. I just hope I can finish before Raven finds out I am back or her team comes to investigate." "Hey Naruto, how are you doing since we passed away?" Knowing that the Raven would strangle him for it, he scowled as he tossed away the now ruined suit jacket. Sakura's icy grin vanished as Sasuke's rage appeared to be erupting. "I'll be a lot better when I put you two in a hole where even your fingers can't find your ignorant asses to scratch. You have no chance against the two of us, Dobi, but those are strong words. Hell, I can't believe it took two of us to get rid of something as weak and pathetic as you. It kind of makes me sick." He watched as his bird flew off and turned to the newly created Nosferatu, and Naruto's smile vanished as well. He looked around, saw no humans caught in the crossfire, and mentally told Nicholas to tell Raven to ignore this, that it was just a small argument. He looked at the two as claws sprang from his hands, frightening Sakura and making Sasuke angry that the blonde also had new power. His eyes narrowed as his head grew longer and sprouted moon-like symbols across his skin. "Let me make amends for my error from years ago and ensure that I kill you both and that you remain dead now that the old teams are all present." Then, as Sakura and Sasuke both lunged for his throat, he bounded forward. Raven opened her eyes, sensing something primordial, something that sort of reminded her of Beast Boy's transformation into a dinosaur. It had the same clear sense of being strong and old, and she wondered what it could be, a spell that brought the dead to the surface. She floated down to her bed and started for the window, but she was stopped when Naruto's bird, Nicholas, flew into the room and to the foot of her bed. She stared at it until it opened its mouth and Naruto's voice could be heard. "I don't like this," she said. "I'm dealing with the negative energies, Raven. And I'm sure you've felt them pulsing. However, you can't be here because I'm going to be fighting two demons that will drain your life force if you approach them closely enough." As soon as the bird finished speaking in Naruto's voice, she scowled visibly, shook her head, and moved to the door. "So please just keep you and your team away from the airport." She turned and her eyes widened as she was about to grasp it and was flung back to her bed by a tremendous force. She nodded and sat down across from it, a little afraid of the ancient creature that had somehow transformed into a bird without her knowledge and remained in that form while keeping this one hidden. Naruto's bird Nicholas was gone, replaced by a large black griffin with arcane symbols running along its skin, watching her with sharp eyes and promising pain if she didn't listen to Naruto. The beast curled up, keeping one eagle, sharp eye on her at all times, and nodded, saying, "I think I will listen to him this time." She simply sat there and glared back at it, as though the giant transmutes were to blame. In California's Death Valley, Sasuke scowled as he threw a hail of kunai at the blonde, who had apparently turned into a coward in his death and was so afraid that he wouldn't even fight them with those new powers that seemed to grant him incredible new physical abilities, if his use of the claws on his hands to leap up a mountain without stopping was any indication. Sasuke growled as Naruto continued to run from him, Sakura, and their summoner. He jumped into a gorge and landed in the darkness, out of their enhanced night sight, and Naruto barrel rolled and backflipped to dodge them all. The blonde had done it as if he had meant to, and if the grace he used was any indication to the hunters, it was just a normal occurrence. He had been trying to lure the chasers away from the city, hoping that no one would be caught in the crossfire, and if they were farther away, Raven wouldn't be able to sense them. So Naruto let loose a wave of demon chakra and waited for it to return to him as he felt all three of his pursuers stop on the hill's crest and look into it for him. "No one here to get into trouble over, it's time to stop running," he said as the three leapt into the gorge, his smile coming back with full force as he felt his energy surge return. The grave ghoul ignored all of this as he extracted a bone from the folds of his cloak, indicating that this was the location the death dog had selected for the battle to take place. Sasuke scanned their new surroundings, swinging his chukado in arcs to light up the shadowy areas, and he growled as Sakura whimpered, stating something about being thirsty. After dropping the scripted bone on the ground, he watched as a huge mass of skeletons rose up from the earth and then broke apart into individual ones, each armed with a bone weapon. He instructed them to find the demon until a voice caught their full attention. He stood on a boulder, his chest now bare, his hair grown to his waist, his muscles trembling as if he were holding back powerful levels of energy, and then he raised his eyes, causing the grave ghoul to frown. His eyes, which had been black in his previous form, were now human-like, but they radiated a heat that made the blonde appear to have their lord and master's lineage within him. He saw that the blonde still had a good deal of power left in reserve, and his smile turned to horror. He had to kill him before he could transform again. In his hand, he drew a flaming dagger, smeared with the poison of the underworld serpent, which lived in the River of Souls and was the only creature from which no being was safe because it was the offspring of the Supreme Being. "You will perish now, death dog, for destroying my masterpiece." He was about to jump up and stab the lichen demon when he stopped, the black fire killing him as the black blade passed through the front of his cloak's shadow. The cloak collapsed in on itself, revealing no body left, and the ghoul trembled, saying, "You traitorous bastard, I will kill you, you will pay for this." Looking at the once living Uchiha, who for some reason had killed his summonera, not that Naruto cared, since he was going to die anyhow, the Uchiha swung his blade, causing the gray blood of the creature to splash onto the walls. "Naruto, we didn't come here to play games. This idiot called us to kill you, and I plan to do just that because you ran away from me in life to die alone. I'm going to kill you this time, you stupid fool." Starved from lack of lifeblood, Naruto stared at the Uchiha. If he had been thinking clearly, he would have seen that the enormous skeletal force was now aimed at the other two as well, rather than just him. Sakura saw this quickly and pointed it out to the fallen Avenger, who cursed as one charged at the pair, only for Naruto to appear and crush its skull, turning it back into bones. They are killed by either destroying the skull or cutting off the neck. Sasuke snarled as he blasted multiple people with a mud dragon, removing their torsos from their bodies, while Sakura simply cashed them in with her punches. "You would do well to remember that, as it is one of your new body's few weaknesses as well. We have a more urgent force to deal with, Naruto, but we will kill you later. So, are you okay with me killing you later?" As the blonde laughed and used the shockwave from a single punch to decimate a group, Sasuke tensed up. "Asshole, whatever you say, we might want to move quickly." Additionally, the bone he dropped was a container, most likely containing a high-level monster that is being held back until its summoner is eliminated. Sasuke nodded as he proceeded to decapitate skeletons, while Sakura threw boulders, crushing the marching forces beneath them. "Despite what you two may believe, we do not want to fight an army of relentless skeletons and some crazed monster at the same time." He ducked as Sakura's kunai nearly impaled his head, cutting his chin lightly, forming a line of blood, and he stiffened as he felt something hop onto his back. Naruto simply hopped to the side as a sword nearly pierced his flesh. He then responded by filling the skeleton's head with hellfire and using it as a grenade, throwing it a large force that was barbecued to ashes. "You taste good, Naruto-kun. Would you mind lending Sasuke-kun and I some supplies for the upcoming fight?" He shrugged his shoulders and knocked her off in the process, destroying a skeleton with a fire-encased punch that released a spear of fire behind him and killed two more. She went wide-eyed as his pure black eyes revealed themselves to her. He shivered inside as he felt the pink-haired Nosferatu lick his cheek and drain all the blood from the wound. "Whether you agree or not, you do that again at all, I'm going to fucking ruin you." As Naruto's spear tackled one skeleton through his rib cage and then used the shattered rib cage to cut the heads off of other skeletons, Sakura scurried back. Sasuke was throwing up water bullets and mud dragons like crazy, and Sakura was simply caving them in. Naruto attacked with a ferocious rage, utterly enraged at what the pink-haired bitch had done to him moments before, and then he smashed the ground with an overhand blow, which was enough to melt most of the remaining skeletons. Naruto's laughter resounded from where he was tearing one apart and turning the bones into a spear, which he then threw through the remaining two, piercing them through their skulls. Sasuke looked around as he crushed a scrambling skeleton's head underfoot, only to have a bite removed from his ankle before it was totally destroyed. "So, Dobi, where is this enormous monster that was purportedly the last line of defense for those idiots?" The two turned and their arrogant grins vanished as Naruto surveyed his surroundings while crouching and gazing up at the gorge's edge. "You can have first dibs on your monster. Uchiha. Sasuke glared at him before turning back to face the monster on the gorge. I personally detested reptilian creatures in the past, but with your life choices, you can cuddle right up to Mr. Snakey. It was a serpent, and since only its head was visible, it was difficult to estimate its size. It had 3 eyes, though, and judging by its hiss, it was especially upset to see Naruto. It reared up, and the 3 fighters went pale. Sasuke leapt back, gaining even distance from the creature, and looked at the blonde in disbelief as 9 more heads appeared. They all appeared to be identical to the first, with the apparent exception that they all wanted Naruto dead. What is that, Dobi? Naruto remained motionless as he faced the creature, attempting to recall a previous encounter, and he watched as its 2 heads started to clash before it struck him. He concluded by recalling the last time he had encountered a Mediterranean hydra, which lived on the Sicilian coast approximately 800 years before Christ. It's a Mediterranean hydra, a snake that can heal itself and is invulnerable to poison. Sakura ducked to avoid one of its heads snapping at her, and Sasuke blanched. As Naruto screamed for him to stop, Sasuke swung his flaming sword and growled. Sasuke smirked back at the blonde, who merely scowled and gestured behind him, but it was too late. The snake's head had been severed and its black blood had gushed from the headless wound. When his sword decapitated the first one, he turned to see 2 more heads growing from the spot, and as he jumped back, blood hit his skin, making it burn like hell, and he was about to be crushed when Sakura caught him and leapt just in time to see the beast's tail crash and leave a fissure. They turned to see Naruto sitting on a ledge above them, observing the hydra with icy hate, and he responded, looking down at the 2 of them. So, did the Uchiha learn his lesson the first time, or do you need to hold off on listening to me until you've given it more heads? Sakura leaned over and sniffed the creature's blood while Sasuke glared at him. Naruto shook his head, remarking that it was like watching lichen cubs for Nick Sagana. They had no idea any better. What's the plan, Naruto? Crap, the thing is at least 3 miles long with the ability to reach both ends of the gorge, and I have to get a better look at it to find the reverse scale where its heart would be, Sakura said, observing the serpent winding itself between the rocks. Naruto then turned to look at the serpent's tail, which had come from the opposite end of the gorge. Sakura watched the blonde's throat and said, "Okay, Sasuke wants to kill me. But we can't fight this big-ass relative of Cerberus sliding around, and we can't let it leave this gorge, or you too will be brought back to help me kill its offspring," Sakura said. Sasuke nodded. "Since you're the quicker of the 2, Sasuke, go up to the half where the head appears to be the most oriented and close it in. Sakura, do the same for the tail end, and I'll get to the point where the large snake behind us has nowhere to escape." The 2 nodded as they dashed off down the ledges of the gorge to their target, with Naruto frowning as he examined what was left of his outfit. "We will meet at the top of the gorge to settle this afterwards, so get going before the big asshole notices that it's not being attacked and gets bored." He remarked, "Raven. Haim is definitely going to kill me," as the Hydra's head swung to face him where he sat on the ledge. It then did something that Naruto most definitely did not recall it being able to do the last time he had fought one. It sprouted arms. As it spat blood at the stone he was sitting on, causing it to burn, Naruto sprang to the side and watched as the creature turned to face him, only to have the gorge tremble and distant boulders fall. The Hydra shook its heads as it focused on the blonde-haired human, the other side reverberating with the falling boulders as well, and lunged at the blonde, confused by the sudden loss of prey a second ago, now only the one that had killed its mate so many years ago. Pulling himself up, Naruto saw what was clearly not good and dove to the side and up the gorge to exact revenge on the beast's heads. As the blonde gazed down at the gorge she was trapped in, he realized that it was female and that it was carrying its brood, all the hundreds of them feeding from her side. He sidestepped as one of the female's heads struck the boulder he was sitting on, flinging him headfirst into the writhing mass of fledgling hydras. Well, we don't have to worry about her moving, but now we have to worry about half-grown babies coming to look for their snacks. Alongside Raven. As Nicholas cawed and attempted to rise but was restrained by some of the markings, Raven opened her eyes, touched the griffin's head, and saw glimpses of Naruto battling skeletons and a huge, hulking monster before witnessing him being flung into the pit of monsters. A sob stifled in her throat as she withdrew her hand and sat down beside the great beast, realizing that Naruto was in Dangara, that he might be Killada and that she had to save him. She couldn't let him perish. Her lover had finally broken the seal that bound him, and he was now fully a demon. She attempted to flee, but felt the faintest remnants of a huge shockwave of power reach her. She froze and cowered at the bloodlust it radiated. Using the Hydra with his full demonization, the excess power from his transformation having burned the weaker skins of the baby Hydras, Naruto stood in a mass of obliterated bodies of the Hydran brood, staring at the mother with a snarl, his human side completely hidden, his target large and slow, already dead to him. As he marched to the mother of the hydrants, Naruto repeatedly wiped the blood from his jaws and burned the youngest of the brood with hellfire that seemed to emanate from him. Some managed to escape, but his teeth tore open their throats. Looking up at the creature, he realized that it was not nearly as strong as the Omega he had fought less than a year ago and that it would not withstand this attack. He reached back an arm and half. Consciously focused on it, watching as black and silver flames came to life before hardening and forming into a sphere. His arm swung forward in a palm strike, crushing the hardened sphere of hellfire against the beast's skin, and he grinned at the beast as he saw it gaze at his hand, then at her dead children. A few miles away he flicked a rock over the surface of the sand as he felt a great drawing of power from the direction the ghoul had last headed in. Nothing was visible of the ghoul's attempt to destroy the hellhound, and to be honest, Damascus didn't think the bloody ghoul stood a chance if the blonde had actually absorbed a page of the Necronomicon as the Lord's spies had claimed. When he looked up, the members of his newly formed dog hunting unit were astounded by what they saw. He watched as the wall continued until it died at the edge of the desert, right where the demonic presence ended, and he looked back at his team, who were staring at the side to the source, and felt fear claw at his stomach. He braced himself as it hit his team, and they went bowling over from the force, all of his men hitting the sand like they had been sucker punched. The wall began to spiral toward them, resembling the force of a nuclear bomb. As they saw a huge force ripple across the sand like a shockwave, they braced themselves once more, with the exception of Damascus, who leapt up at the last second. A mushroom cloud of demon energy, burning red and black from Death Dog's power signature, was visible on the horizon. As he looked across the sand, he saw a pink-haired Nosferatu racing towards him. Unsure of what to think, he leapt forward and impaled her with an obsidian stake, killing her as he picked her up and marched to the spot where the firestorm had begun. His unit was fried, their blackened corpses falling apart to reveal demon fire burning away at their insides. It had been far too long since Naruto used power like that, and now he was hungry from the effort. He sat in a crater, tearing a piece of flesh away from the Mother Hydra's bone he was holding, and he smirked as he looked around. He was a dog of the battlefield because of this sight, which warmed the icy side of his demon and broke the human side. This was the reason he had been so drawn to war. The rest of the Hydras erupted in a blast of fire, their ashes falling to the ground, along with their raining blood. He nodded and cackled at the thought of how close he had brought a mother to her children, and he pointed his hand to the right as he gnawed on a bone. Smoke, corpses, and the cries of slain Hydran brood were all around him. They called out for their mother in their own language, and he laughed as their mother was now all around them, covering their flesh in her own flesh and blood. After finishing his meal, Naruto stood up and surveyed the area. There were no living things left, save for the Uchiha, who was horrifiedly observing his greatest work to date. He threw the bone away and started to ascend the crater's edge, opening his mouth to taste the bitter blood of his vanquished foes. Looking to the edge as the blonde pulled himself over the edge and took the position of a healed dog, Sasuke wondered what the blonde had seen in death as he saw how ruthlessly he destroyed the Hydran brood, and he wished he had Sakura here now that he saw the power the blonde possessed, not knowing if he could defeat him alone. Pulling his flaming sword from where he had stabbed it into the ground next to him, Sasuke jumped back and placed it in a basic position while the blonde pretended to be hurt. "You never bonded with your team before sending them to find me, and I killed them. Why don't you give your ally from the last battle, Uchiha, a hug? By the way, that was really stupid of you." Sasuke roared as he charged at the blonde, swinging his sword at his bare throat. "All the potential of that group and you threw them away at an enemy you yourself were scared to fight." That wouldn't be the case, though, as the Lycan seized the arm containing the flaming blade and bit down on it before tearing it off the Uchiha's arm. As Naruto threw the arm and its flaming blade over the edge of the cliff, Sasuke screamed as blood poured from his now empty socket. He then proceeded to the Uchiha, picking him up by his blood soaked clothing as fire appeared in his hands and a battle chain with an axe blade on the end appeared in a flash. Sasuke turned to face the demon that had examined him and stabbed him in the stomach with a powerful motion. He was in terrible pain as the weapon pierced his body with so many blades that he was unable to remove it. Naruto grinned, his teeth gleaming with a brightness reminiscent of moonlight. "Stay with me, Uchiha. I want to watch as the torture causes your consciousness to collapse and you wish you were dead. Let's begin with my personal favorite, around the globe." The Lycan drew the chain closer and swung him into the cliff's stone, causing it to shatter and crumble beneath him. Sasuke screamed as the blonde started swinging the lengthening chain through the air above the cliff, the Uchiha following suit as they continued to spin high above it. He was like a ball and chain, And he was the ball. The lichen laughed as he pulled him across the ground, causing more pain than he had ever experienced as the blade tried to make it impossible to remove itself from the dark-haired vampire's stomach. The pain was so intense that the former thief's eyes widened. "Are you still alive? All right, next is a friend of mine's favorite song in hell. Slingshot ready." He fell over the edge and was caught by the chain in his stomach, which caused him to cough up blood. Naruto then threw him back out like a fishing line. As he was thrown into the air and shot point blank into the cliff's still, half-standing stone, he began to hyperventilate from the blood loss, and the stone avalanched on top of him. "Oh my! Where has my Uchiha gone?" Naruto exclaimed, looking around while wearing a fake mask of fear. As the chain hopped into his hands, he grinned and lifted the now Seizures vampire from the debris, grabbing him by the throat and setting him upright while dropping the chain and placing a pod foot on the end. "You might need some fresh air because you don't look so good, old friend." After the Uchiha returned to Earth from his flight through the air, the lichen plowed him in the stomach and watched as he flew off into the air, the ever-lengthening chain following him until he was no longer visible in the darkness. The lichen then grabbed the chain and yanked down hard, causing the Sharingan user's screams to fill the air until he went flying into the destroyed rubble in front of the lichen. Shaking his head and pulling the Uchiha back to eye level by his hair, Naruto approached the Uchiha as he sat gasping for air and made a fruitless attempt to take off the chain. Naruto then vanished in a flash of dark fur and stopped again in an equally swift manner, the Uchiha now completely encased in black chain, making it impossible to see him. "It seems that you are trying to get rid of the chain. Maybe you and it need to get better acquainted. What are your thoughts on her now? She and that Sakura bitch share a similar touch, which is cold and dishonest." Then Naruto drew closer to him. With terrifying speed, the chain broke off the Uchiha, sending the poor soul spinning like a top directly in front of Naruto, who kicked him viciously in the stomach while he flew into another stone formation in the distance, sending the formation crashing to the ground. "Looks like I got a bite," Naruto said with a gleeful laugh as he dragged the Uchiha back to him and dragged it to the cliff's edge. Before he felt the blade yanked free from his stomach, Sasuke's eyes widened as he flew through the air and slammed into the ground below, saying, "Whoops, just a small fry, better throw him back." He peered at the creature that was lurking towards him with his now broken and cut face. After the battle with the skeletons and hydras at the gorge, Sasuke was immobile and had no chakra left, but the blonde, who was now dead, was positively exploding with it. He sighed as the werewolf-like creature lifted him into the air, and in two quick crunching noises and a piercing scream, he lost both of his legs. He was then flung to the ground as the blonde threw the legs over the cliff and conjured a spear into his hand. The blonde then drove a spear through the Uchiha's waist, attaching him to the ground while he was moving. "You know, Sasuke, we never got off to giving the new introductions when we met. How about you go first?" As Naruto glanced down at Sasuke and conjured up another spear, he simply let out a cry of agony. "Sasuke, nothing new to add," he said, essentially nailing himself to the ground by driving the accompanying spear into his breastbone. "Well, don't you think I've evolved into a really strong individual?" Naruto corrected the Uchiha's unconscious state by slamming his foot down on his happy place. He grinned as he heard both of his jewels break, and the Uchiha didn't respond. "Are you still here? Good. Since you have been dead for 4,000 years, I have had plenty of time to strengthen myself, as evidenced by how effectively I am destroying you at this very moment." Naruto had a message to deliver before the ass died, so he thrust his giant paw into the Uchiha's gut and tore it open, causing his eyes to open in horror as the blonde stood above him. Sasuke didn't respond because he could feel the last of the ninja's life leaving him. Disregard the call the next time someone has the brilliant idea to bring you back to life. Alternatively, your clan's Tsukiyomi will be nothing more than a bad idea in comparison to what I will do when things change in any way, like tonight. Sweet nightmares now. The blonde finished as he walked over to the Uchiha's head, summoned an executioner's axe, and brought it down in an arc that spread the vampire's internal organs across the stone. He then turned to face Damascus and scooped up the head. "Please spread the word, old friend. If you try to harm me before I reach a certain point in my new life here, I'll fight on the side of heaven the next time Armageddon strikes. Enjoy the body, by the way. You've always loved being arrogant. Goodbye." Then, in a flash of red fire, the lichen disappeared, leaving behind a terrified glutton and a night's worth of corpses. The blonde was now officially a threat to anyone who followed him, whether they were gods, demons, angels, or humans. They would have to wait until he was content with his life, since it was difficult to bring Armageddon to pass if one of their horsemen opposed them. A few miles away from where he had killed the Hydra and Nosferatu, Naruto emerged in a blaze of flame. Before turning to go in the other direction, he glanced toward Jump City. I have been held at bay too long, and I am going to enjoy myself before I am stuffed back into that weak human shell. He would find some powerful prey in the northeast, the 8-foot hulking monster gazed. His human side was trying to convince him to relinquish control, but he chose to ignore it and run on all fours toward the state line, his destination of the Canadian wilderness, despite the fact that his blood was boiling in response, telling him that he was making the right decision. In the tower, he transformed back into a blackbird, and Nicholas stood. Raven raised his head in surprise. As the bird closed its eyes and remained motionless, she questioned, "Is he coming home now, Nicholas?" While his master was running, the bird was searching through the souls that lived in the area. He was moving farther away and would not be returning to this city. Before the bird informed her, Raven understood what it meant. He wasn't going home and wasn't yet back to normal. She got up, walked to her window, and then peered out. Although she didn't want to, she would have to capture him herself, which seemed to be her only option. Nicholas nodded his head in agreement with her thoughts as he flew out of the room and sat on her shoulder. She grinned and expressed her gratitude to whatever God had granted her the ability to use the bird to aid her in catching the blonde. At the U.S.-Canada border, as he stood on the edge of the United States, Naruto gazed at the massive trees that covered the horizon and the cozy feeling that came with them. He was always near the wilderness and the natural order of nature because he was a lichen. About 2 miles to his left, he detected the scent of a fire. He ripped a hole in the steel fence between the two nations and snarled. Then he set out to find genuinely powerful prey. There was no prey nearby, and when he emerged from the camp, it was empty. As he walked languidly, searching for any prey to battle, he batted away a fallen tree. He ran through the woods and found nothing more untamed than foxes and rabbits, nothing to satisfy his desire for a worthy victim. Just as he was about to give up, he saw 2 enormous grizzlies engaged in combat in a clearing. As he leapt between the combatants, his wide, open mouth transformed into something resembling a smile. A missile of fur and muscle sent both bears flying back, and both came to a stop. Lazily, they rolled back up to confront the new assailant. Their assailant was big, maybe a bit larger than they were. When he discovered the 2 fighting bears, he was only passing through because he did not smell of the nearby forests. He had the appearance of one of those northern plains wolves, only much bigger and more powerful. The bear that was closest to the lichen roared and sprang up on its back legs. Instead of roaring in response, Naruto threw the grizzly to the ground and ripped into its helpless neck before turning to face the other as it bled out onto the snow below. Naruto leapt at this bear, but it was struck by its great paw and sent flying into the forest to the left, causing the other bear to back up. The bear waited for it to charge back out of the trees, looking off into the direction it had fled into. Except for the fact that it came up behind it and crushed its heart in the paw that impaled the bear, it was not let down as it flew out of the trees. It then fell to the ground and started eating the now dead animal. While it consumed both bears and searched for a water source to wash the blood from its mouth, Naruto remained there indefinitely. He heard something and his ears turned on his head as he was leaving the clearing. As the creatures gaped at the size of the wolf-like creature, 2 men, weighed down with thermal gear, pointed guns at the lichen. One grinned and aimed its weapon at Naruto, who looked fearlessly back at the barrel. His highly developed hunting instinct took the place of his instincts, which would typically tell a creature to run away. The silence of the forest was broken by a thunderous boom as the man squeezed the trigger. To the east, 400 yards. When Raven heard the gunfire, she looked up, and Nicholas looked in the same direction before she took off to investigate the noises. For a moment, she discovered the clearing and froze. Over 2 unconscious hunters, their guns lying to the side like scrap metal, stood a monstrous beast. Nicholas cawed as he prepared to bite into their throats. Even in its haze of injury from being shot multiple times by the hunters, Naruto's lichen form turned to face the girl and the bird. The creature backed away into the forest, allowing the growing snowfall to cover his descent into the darkness of the trees after it took a moment to recognize Raven in her cold weather gear. Raven simply gazed at the location, utterly terrified by what he had just witnessed. It resonated in the same way as Naruto's demon form. Before calling forth a mass of shadows and carrying them away to the closest town, she gazed at the bare skeletons and the unconscious hunters in the snow. Naruto allowed her to see him in his form while he was running. He fled for the forest, stopping at a wide river not far from the border to the lakes, because he knew she was in danger if his defensive instincts took over. He stared at his reflection in the rushing water, a large gray, white, and black wolf that, aside from its eyes, his eyes, looked exactly like a ruthless killer. They were full of fairness, love, compassion, forgiveness, respect, and a strong desire to assist. The wolf gazed at the water before whimpering and curling up, marking the start of a metamorphosis. His fur started to retract into his skin as he lay there, and his head shrank and his mouth, ears, and eyes returned to their natural form. He glanced at his hands, which had shrunk, the claws gone, the pads on his paws replaced by his regular gloves. As the creature's cry changed to a demon's gushing, it exclaimed, HHHAWWWWWOHHHHHHH. In the snow, Naruto fell to his knees and gave himself a hug. His eyes were gushing blood, which hit the snow beneath him and burned through it all the way to the smoking ground. When Raven and Nicholas found him, they discovered this scene. Even though the sobs had stopped, he was still bleeding from his eyes and chest. He struck mercilessly at the thick layer of ice on the ground, as though it were the source of all his suffering. Raven approached him from behind but halted when she heard his voice. Raven, I would like to go back to the tower. It has been a very long day, so please can we go? A dark raven shadow enveloped them all as they vanished from the snowy terrain, and Raven nodded. California's Jump City. A few seconds later, the three were in Raven's bedroom, with Naruto lying on his pallet, faceless and facing the wall. When Nicholas caught at him, he did not respond. Raven approached him from behind and gave him a foot bump. She wasn't prepared for what he said when he looked up at her. Raven. I am moving out of the tower. I am going to get an apartment in the city with the money I made from my job. After all, I have stayed here long enough, and I think it would be best if I found a place of my own, at least for the time being. As he lay there facing her ceiling, Raven scowled at him and gave him another shove. She nodded in response as he looked up. Naruto sat up and gave the girl a startled look. That is fine, you do what you think you need to. After all, I just realized something you still haven't done yet. What have I not done? Naruto became silent as she observed him, then nodded. She scowled as she said, you still haven't met my friends. That made him wince. As he sat on his heels, she nodded and said, that sounds reasonable. You are going to the tea shop tomorrow? He went to the bookshelf and picked himself up. Raven nodded as the blonde took a book on classic architecture from her bookshelf and placed it on his pallet while she went to take a shower. Then you can introduce me tomorrow, provided that you make a cover story. I am tired of lying to people about myself. Since I haven't met her friends yet, they will likely react suspiciously because I ran away from them. Oh well, I can do anything for her. Around midday the following day, when Beast Boy heard the bell ring, he moved toward the door. After 30 minutes and the fact that it's free, he pondered whether it was the pizza delivery guy. When he opened the door, he saw the gloomy, typically irate Raven standing beside the blonde boy he believed he remembered. He looked up at the blonde, observing his appearance, and said, Hey Raven, who is the new guy? In order to avoid triggering any memories, Naruto had eschewed his leather jacket and slacks. In addition to the ubiquitous gloves, he wore another pair of sunglasses, just like the ones he wore when he first met the Kingpin. But the rest of the ensemble was brand new. To Raven's dismay, he claimed that the boots he wore on his feet had metal accents, just in case he had to fight his way out. He wore tan cargo pants and a belt made of a metal chain that was wrapped around his waist multiple times. The front of his gray shirt was adorned with pictures of lightning and spiraling clouds. He wore a canvas jacket over that, which had 2 breast pockets on the front. His raven ring was in place, and the back pockets concealed his watch from prying eyes. His dog tags were worn outside his shirt. His eyes were hidden by his glasses. His hair had fallen loose to his shoulders from its typical ponytail. A black turtle was stamped on a leather band that he wore around his arm. As Raven spoke, he yawned and threw his shoulders wide. The green one nodded as Naruto towered over him, his muscles barely concealed by his shirt. Beast Boy. This is an old friend of mine from when before I met any of you. I sensed his presence earlier this morning and went out to meet him. Why did you bring him here, Raven? Raven asked, looking at him as though he didn't know enough. Beast Boy's mouth slid off and shattered like glass against the floor as he said, I brought him for you all to meet him. He was cut off when Cyborg appeared, staring at the group bewildered. Hey BB, is that the pizza guy? Raven, what are you doing here? I thought you were in town. With a sigh, Raven told Cyborg who Naruto was once more. Cyborg was a little kinder to Naruto, but she also mentioned that he was composed of molten lava. After that, the group escorted him to the elevator, which led to the operations room on the top floor. The doors led to a hallway that Naruto was already familiar with, but he pretended to be intrigued and asked some questions, to which Cyborg responded. Raven was astounded by the blonde's acting prowess. It appeared as though he had never been here before. She grinned to herself as Robin sat at the computers, reviewing the current Hive 5 escape, and Starfire was the first to welcome them through the doors. As she gave each of them a death hug, she asked, Friends, who is the person that has been brought to the tower, and why is he here? Raven sighed and Cyborg responded. Starfire, this is an old friend of Raven's. He was in town and she brought him here to meet us. This good news made Starfire squeal, and she gave the blonde a death hug. Raven asked her to stop, and Starfire took hold of his arm and pulled him over to meet Robin, while Cyborg, Beast Boy, and Raven flinched at the blonde wrapped in an embrace that he pretended was painful. The masked teenager merely sagged at this new situation, which meant he would never be able to complete his new network of criminals. Friend Robin. Friend Raven has brought a friend from her past to meet us. Do you wish to say hello? She said. The two halted as they locked eyes as Robin turned to face the blonde. Something in his gut told him that he had seen that figure before. Where did it come from? It hammered at his memory like a sledgehammer. Naruto extended his hand, the polished ring on his finger gleaming. The blonde's voice distracted Robin from his mental interrogation. Wincing a little at the vice grip placed on his fingers, Robin shook the blonde's hand and said, "Nice to meet you. My name is Naruto Uzumaki." Raven brought her and Naruto some tea, and they all sat down. Robin began the conversation in a straightforward manner. Naruto turned to face Raven, who nodded and started talking. So where did you meet Raven, Naruto? Naruto asked. As Beast Boy asked the next question, Robin nodded and put away the information that had been given to him. I met Naruto in northern Russia. He was in the military station there. We met after seeing the castles on the same day. Naruto pushed a few hairs out of his face and shrugged, asking, so why is it you came here? Raven said that she had found some friends she wanted to meet, and I was on my way to the US anyway. The Metal Titan used this opportunity to pose the query that had been bothering him ever since the blonde arrived. Naruto drank some tea and nodded, asking, you mentioned that you were in the military. How old are you exactly? I am 18 by my military records, but I enlisted 2 years earlier than allowed us to get away from my home, so I am 16. She blurted out her question because Starfire was eager to ask it. Friend Naruto, why would you join an army to get away from your home? Naruto thanked Raven, but Raven interrupted him by saying, Starfire, I don't think that is a very fair question to ask. People's pasts are their own for specific reasons. The alien girl nodded. So Naruto, you've been in the Russian military for a while, right? Why leave now? Robin inquired again as Starfire hung her head. Naruto looked at Raven, who nodded and scowled. Pulling down the corner of his shirt to reveal the spot where the hunter's bullets had blasted him the night before, he shook his head. I came here to see Raven before I started on another trek to see the world. Robin grimaced at the question and attempted to apologize as Naruto waved him away. I was discharged due to my injuries. Mother Russia could no longer use me, and she sent me away with full honors. After that, Raven got up and shook her head, claiming that Beast Boy had interrupted them and caused her to forget the introductions. Naruto nodded to each of them in turn before they stopped, the computer behind them beeping. The green one is Beast Boy. Cyborg is the large half-metal one. Starfire is the girl who nearly crushed you in an embrace when you came in, and Robin is the team's leader. Robin sagged after gliding through the air to the screen. There is no threat, only the Titans East clocking in as usual. When he turned around again, the group had vanished, save for Naruto, who was sitting on the couch and staring around bewildered. As he reclined on the couch, Naruto rubbed his nose and asked, So Naruto, you said that you were in the Russian military, what did you do? Before he asked, Robin looked up in surprise and said, I was in the special task force. We worked with extraction of people from hostile areas, and I was my group's combat expert. So you were their fighter. Do you still spar after your injury? Maybe if you are going to stick around we can have a practice fight later. As he stood, Naruto nodded and gave Robin a salute before making his way to the door. As the computer beeped and he opened his criminal file and started updating their system, Robin nodded and said, I will leave you to your work. Maybe I can go help the other Titans with something. After hearing the telltale sign of an argument in the hallway, Naruto entered the room and saw the green person arguing with Cyborg. As they worked on the T-car, the green one argued, Cy, why won't you let me ask the new guy questions? If he is friends with Raven, there is no way I am going to scare him off. From beneath the car, the metal teen said, because we have never met any of Raven's friends before and we don't want to go prying into his past BB, it isn't cool. As Beast Boy leaned against the car, causing it to fall off its jack and onto the metal titan, Naruto kept approaching the two. When Cyborg felt his car stop on its descent by someone else, he dropped his wrench and attempted to prevent it from crushing him. Beast Boy simply stared at the blonde who was pacing the car without responding, saying, Thanks BB. That could have been a problem if I wasn't ready. Beast Boy said something that startled Cyborg, and he was perplexed. Cyborg looked at the blonde who simply nodded from the other side of the room while he studied the blueprints for the T-car rolling across the screen. Dude, wasn't me. Naruto did it. I tried to catch it but boom, he was already there. He grabbed the bumper, lifted it, and kicked the jack back up with his foot and laid it down. With a nod, Naruto responded in a light tone that suggested he wasn't really listening. Hey man, thanks. Though how did you lift it? The T-Car's body armor makes it pretty heavy, even for me. Cyborg nodded and was about to inquire if the blonde participated in any sports, but he omitted the doors, stating that he had to locate Raven. I am very strong for my figure. It serves with being in the military for so long. I couldn't hold your car for long, but gratefully I didn't have to. Sitting in the gym, Naruto observed the different pieces of equipment the Titans used. He was searching for Raven, but she seemed to feel that he should not speak to her too frequently during his first visit and had gone to her room, claiming to be behind in her meditation. As the door opened and Starfire entered, Naruto dismissed this. She gestured to the blonde who was pondering while perched on a bench. When he waved back at her, she flew over and gave him another monster hug, but he gave it back, causing her back to pop. Friend, do you wish to help me make a shining example of the tower for the people who will wish to see it clean? Was the girl asking Naruto to help her clean? He looked at her bewildered. With a shrug, he stood up and followed her. Unbeknownst to him, she simply meant cleaning the entire tower, which he was forced to do against his will and in everyone's opinion. In fact, he set Starfire's pace. After a few hours, outside the tower, with his bag slung over his shoulder, Naruto stood outside the tower. It contained everything he had stored here, with the exception of an emergency change of clothes. As the Titans made their way back inside, he waved and said he was free to return whenever he had time. He waited for them to go, then let out a sigh and turned to face the darkness to his left. As he spoke, he moved his bag. The shadows then shifted from the wall and gathered beside him, with Raven emerging from them as he stood gazing out at the city. They're not here, Raven. They all went back inside. Unable to shake the instinct that he was going to flee and never return, she said, you will call me when you find a place to stay, right? He nodded, kissed her cheek, and left, heading for the city just as she was about to ask. He vanished, and Raven watched him return to the tower. He had asked her a question earlier that had caught her attention, so she would see him tomorrow. A brief flashback after spending the majority of the day getting to know the Titans as a whole. Naruto sat next to Raven on the top of the tower. After all, he needed her friend's approval if they were ever going to trust the two to be alone as they are now. As he selected a metal shuriken to materialize in his hands, she gazed at him questioningly and said, Raven. I have noticed something as well. What is it? She inquired, curious as to what could be causing her lover to think so deeply. As he threw the shuriken into the distance, she felt her mouth form a O shape and watched it soar over the resonant blackness of the night. We have yet to go on a date, and we have already been together for about 6 months. Would you like to go on a date, Raven? I promise to treat you like a princess if you do. Besides, it will help me feel as if our relationship is going somewhere. They had to act as though they were friends for the time being, and she nodded as she kissed his cheek. He grinned as he stood up and escorted her back into the tower. Hopefully, that will change in the future. I've lived long enough to know that her patience will wear thin before mine, so I won't do anything she doesn't want to. Concluding flashback without telling Raven that he was going to live here, Naruto simply cleaned one up with the money and went down the street to the location of the abandoned factory district. After all, if the warmth she exuded when Starfire hugged him was any indication, she was somewhat protective of him, even though she wouldn't acknowledge it. He nodded as he paused outside a smaller one. This was it. The factories to the west were operating so efficiently that it appeared the water and electricity would be a simple fix, and he would find plenty of use for this one. Home, my dear, filthy, muddy home. Before I bring her here, this place will definitely need some repairs. Sparks flew across the stone floor, illuminating the space with their brightness. A blonde holding a blowtorch while removing parts from an old assembly line was the source of the sparks. Peering out of the casing, Naruto's head searched for the source of the noise. Since the police had busted the warehouse a block away for housing a criminal base, he had been a little jittery. He needed to exercise more caution because he didn't want to end up in jail if Raven discovered that he had been robbing businesses throughout the city. He observed the assortment of parts scattered on the ground, the heavy machinery, and the tool sets. As he turned the back rooms into his home, he turned his gaze back to the machines he had disassembled and used to fix the structural damage. Even though the money he left behind didn't cover the items he took, he had still managed to free a few other items from all over the city. He had to get this thing disassembled so the parts could be used more effectively. After searching for a way to remove the soot from his face, Naruto shrugged, took off his shirt, and used it to wipe his face before climbing back into the casing and disassembling the device, dumping its components onto the stone floor. After extracting himself and cleaning his head, he went to the room he had converted into a bathroom. The 6-inch steel doors on each room's entrance were the best he could do because they melted down the leftover plates that would have been used for the ship's hulls and worked reasonably well. He entered the space that had been converted into a restroom. The shower, which was merely a water pipe that he had connected to the upper floor and connected a transport system to get the knobs functioning to a respectable degree, was depressing. There was no need to do anything in the room because the toilet and sink were already there. He exited the shower and made his way to his new bedroom, the foreman's office. He looked at his wardrobe in the closet. She made him wear different clothes to blend in, which was annoying because he had only worn one outfit since the Jehovah's Witnesses wars. He selected one set and put it on with a growl. Everything was there. A brown shirt, snow camo cargo pants, gloves, a watch, a ring, and sunglasses. In the closet, beside the Damascus cleaver, his gun hung on a hook from his gun belt. He glanced at a dark black Attache copyright case at the back of the closet. I won't need that for a very long time, so no, I don't need it. After the last time, I gave up on that. The only issue is that I'm not sure if I have enough power, so I should have destroyed it instead of ever taking it back from its damned pocket dimension. As he exited the room, Naruto shook his head and used an anchor lock with seals engraved on it to secure the pull-down gate and all 3 doors. He didn't need that to bother him. He had other things to do. If it fell into the hands of someone who was hostile to him, he was powerless to stop it. He would have to hope that nobody ever found it until he discovered a location that even his former master couldn't locate. On his way to the Titan's tower to collect Raven, he shook his head. In the tower, Raven was going crazy. Learning spells from a sinister force imprisoned inside a book had been the closest thing she had ever had to a date. She was unsure about how to react precisely and how she would conceal her identity while they were out on the town. As she examined the assortment of boots, leotards, and robes, she remarked, "I have a date with a boy I love, and I have nothing to wear. Well, nothing of human descent." She had some Azereth robes, but she couldn't wear them around because they would draw more attention than her regular attire. She let out a sigh and searched her dressers for something. She grinned as she pulled open the final drawer. There was a brown-wrapped package on the ground with Naruto's long-handed medieval script elegantly written across it. "Dear Heim, got you something to wear, as you took most of my money to buy me clothes that I will probably never wear. Love, Naruto." After removing the twine and taking out the package, Raven peered inside. There were black jeans, a blue blouse, shoes, and a black jacket with a cloth hood to wear over them. Grinning, she changed and walked out of her room. When he watched Raven take her book off the table and go, Cyborg was the only person in the operations room. He simply sat there, perplexed as to how and why anyone had forced her to change out of her typical attire. He simply shrugged and resumed his game after turning up the music. Raven crept to the lower level, where Naruto stood in the door's shadow, grinning that she had dressed in the attire that the store clerk had suggested. Raven watched the pair with icy mechanical eyes as they left the tower after she nodded. Raven never noticed the shadow at the bottom of the beach. When Naruto saw it, he mentally noted that he should become more difficult to find. They both strolled through downtown in search of a place to eat where they wouldn't be bothered. They had made the decision to eat first, after which they could look for something to do. Raven noticed a small, silent cafe copyright when she looked up. It was exactly what she had hoped for, so she took his arm and ushered them into the cafe copyright. To avoid being caught by surprise, Naruto followed, keeping an eye on everything. With Raven by his side, he was so perceptive that he could practically see things before they happened around him. He hardly ever went a day in this world without being followed by someone who worked for the countless forces that wanted him dead, and tonight was no different. Raven asked him what he was going to eat, so he settled down in the booth next to her and relaxed. She simply looked at him with a question mark over her head and said, "I am going to eat whatever they have that is served in a steaming golden layer and is seasoned with spices from Italy. I am going to have the spinach and barasque ravioli. What about you, Raven, Heim?" Raven scowled as she glanced at the menu. She had never realized it wasn't in English, and even though she could read other languages, she couldn't read Italian. As Naruto glanced over her shoulder at the menu, she began to perspire. She nodded and abruptly prodded him in the arm, saying, "The seafood pasta sounds good. I just don't like mussels that much." As the waiter arrived and took their order, Naruto scowled and said, "You don't like mussels, yet you were built to a level that you could pass as a pro wrestler." He then departed and they both settled in. After glancing at him, she folded her hands under her chin and asked, "So what do you want to talk about, Raven?" They could discuss anything and everything. Before her, the blonde demon had seen everything, done everything, and been everywhere. In some way, she would be very fortunate to discover a subject that he was unaware of. He scowled as he considered his response. "How did the search for an apartment go? You never did call me back at the tower." I couldn't call you as I don't own a phone or any type of communication. The apartment might take a while. People aren't very trusting of teenagers living on their own due to some group called the Hive graduates causing all sorts of trouble. Raven considered all the trouble they could have caused him if he had encountered them, and she nodded. He wasn't in the tower, which was already a minor problem. She had to redecorate her room after losing some emotional control twice. With a sigh, she handed the conversation to him. He understood what she was saying right away, but she didn't respond. Raven, when was the last time you went on vacation? Like a real vacation, no missions? She merely slumped. They nodded as they sat there unwinding in the quiet, saying, Raven, food's here, let's just eat. I am very talented, but you really don't want to try and get my attention when I am eating. After eating, they sat there for approximately 30 minutes without speaking or knowing what else to say. Naruto simply sat there and played with his unused knife, making it spin between his fingers like a conductor's baton, while Raven was dumbfounded. Eventually, Raven grew weary of this and moved closer to him, resting her head on his shoulder. They sat there, just enjoying the sensation of each other's company, while Naruto's arms slithered around her and rubbed her shoulder. Half an hour later, Naruto and Raven were out on the streets once more, searching for something to do. At the matinee that regularly screened scary films, Raven had recommended Blood and Chocolate. As they continued to walk down the street to an antique shop, she fell silent. Naruto had just looked at her and said, You want to see a movie about werewolves, as in big finalized evolutions of dogs? Would you like me to just run around in my demon form in downtown? I could maul a mailman if it makes it more entertaining. Naruto shivered as he looked up at it. This unsettling feeling that something was waiting for him in here bothered him. They turned left down a side street, and he dismissed it since Raven didn't appear interested. As they strolled on, Naruto occasionally glanced into storefront windows, observing the person who had been following him all night through their reflections. He had a gut feeling that something was there, but he didn't see anyone. Raven became aware as he glanced around once more and considered in silence whether he believed they were being followed. She was aware that the damned bird had flown off a short while ago after following us from the park. He now pretended to be being targeted, and if the tenseness in his arms was any indication, she could tell whatever it was that made him nervous. Naruto guided Raven to the busier downtown district, where bars and clubs were more prevalent. He kept going until Raven stopped, at which point she stood behind him and surveyed the area. The club behind them appeared to be largely empty and was their best place to go without being bothered, but there didn't seem to be anywhere they could enjoy traveling around. She grabbed him, pulled him back into the club, and led him to the dance floor, which was almost deserted. The only other patrons were two tables of people who appeared to have just left work and a short man at the bar. As they danced, or rather, she danced and he was being led about like a submissive dog, Raven placed Naruto in front of her and put her arms around his neck, drawing him close and bouncing back and forth. Soon after, they began to pace, and Naruto encircled her smaller frame with his larger arms, seemingly protecting her from everything around them. Before it stopped and the man stood up to go, they kept dancing to the mellow piano in the background. Naruto glanced around before speaking. He was setting up a stereo when she took his face in her hands and said, Well, it seems our music has left. I guess we don't have anything else to dance to. She scowled as he sighed. He didn't appear to be having fun. Was he ill, or was there something wrong with him? Naruto, are you alright? You don't seem to be enjoying any dancing that we have done here, is it me? She nodded as they started dancing again, but Naruto's focus returned to the here and now, stopping her. No, it isn't you. It is just dancing is something that never ended in fond memories for me. Play Coldplay's Death and all his friends. Now that they appeared to be happier, Raven and Naruto moved to the song's harmony with much more grace. They wished that their time together would never end as Naruto whirled Raven around and around while humming the song's beat. As the song came to an end, Raven halted, and Naruto guided her off the ground and out of the city to their initial meeting spot. Sitting beside Raven in the sand, Naruto gazed up at the half moon. Since he was staying put and would protect her to the point where she would never be hurt, he was looking forward to many more nights like this one in the future. Raven couldn't help but notice Naruto's genius as he was strong, considerate of her, and composed in perilous circumstances. It seemed as though they had been cut from the same mold because they were so similar. She sighed as he put his arms around her, allowing her to use her powers as she usually did when he was around because they never had an impact on him. Black energy suddenly enveloped Naruto, who was launched through the air like a stone and struck the sand with a boom to get away from her. When she approached him, he gazed at her with wide eyes. As she helped him up, she said, Naruto, I am so sorry, are you alright? She nodded as he got up and held her, and she hugged him back as she felt him negate her powers like normally and relaxed. I'm fine, Heim. It was just unexpected, that's all. I am not hurt, I promise. It was just a flaw, nothing to be concerned about. She was worried because she believed she had hurt him, and she was hurt when he was taken from her. She loved him too much to do that to him. Naturally, Naruto's love was reciprocal. Even when they were cuddling, he treated her as though she were made of glass. She couldn't and wouldn't push him away. An hour or so later, Naruto dropped her off at the tower. As he continued, she kissed his cheek and disappeared into the darkness. Naruto was perplexed. He had minimized the gravity of Raven's minor emotional incident by claiming that he had momentarily let his powers slip and that her attempts to activate his lament ones had been unsuccessful. In actuality, when she had given him a hug, he had not felt his humanity. He had to figure out a way to ensure that didn't happen again because he was just a regular demon in the eyes of those who followed him. He would therefore need to escape and figure out how to use his human body to the point where it nearly overpowered his demon one. He only had one option, and that was to keep fighting anyone who might pose a threat to an average person. It looks like I'll have to visit the Kingpin sometime in the next day or so. I'll give him a call tomorrow and hopefully find a job. Wilson Fisk sat at his desk, reading the most recent mission that his young, blonde staff had executed brilliantly, a smile piercing his normally composed exterior. The youngster was dispatched to Metropolis in order to pilfer a highly classified type of polycarbonated dense alloy and biomolecular armored clothing. LexCorp had invented the alloy and the cloth, and would sell for an incredible price. Naruto was sent into Luther's labs to retrieve them no more than a day after Fisk overheard him discussing it during his speech at the Science Institute in Maine. After being successfully recovered, they were being duplicated for the Kingpin's office in a laboratory 3 floors below. He had instructed them to start by building a full-sized bodysuit with stealth capabilities, a light helmet with a visor and cutting-edge electronic features, and a constructed select armor that could only be attached to the suit. He intended to give the blonde a gift of these items for his future employment. The true rationale, however, was that the blonde would soon be the target of the Justice League's pursuit, and in order for him to live, his body would require certain defenses against them, which the Kingpin was happy to supply. The phone on his desk rang, and the Kingpin answered, grinning at his good fortune. The other end of the line said, "Fisk here," but was cut off by a machine gun shot followed by a curse. "Hello Fisk, Penguin here. I have recently gotten news that you have a very promising agent on your payroll that seems to be able to do impossible things, is this true?" As he turned to face the city from his chair, Fisk's smile vanished. If the Gotham criminals had found out about Naruto, they might have tried to recruit him, which could have cost him a devoted agent whose loyalty was extremely valuable, either through death or desertion. After seeing what the obnoxious Birdman desired, he would decline his offer. The Penguin interrupted the line by yelling at someone and likely hitting him with an umbrella before responding, "What if I do, Penguin? What could you possibly need with him?" "Well Fisk, I have a short lying disagreement with the criminal underground of Gotham, who has hired both Bane and a man known as Deadshot. I have allied myself with Freeze after I busted him out of Arkham, and am in need of someone with your agent's talents, if what I heard from my little bird in Metropolis is true." As he considered the man's offer, Fisk let a little escape his throat. Before anything was considered to be agreed to, he would need to know what the man needed Naruto for. "What do you need my young man for, Penguin? Some foolish enforcing?" he asked. "Heavens no Fisk. I need him to help me and Freeze steal something from Gotham's Museum of Antiquities. His efforts will probably be pointed to him stealing a small artifact and perhaps taking out one of the 2 guards that the underground has hired to protect the artifacts, one of the 2 previously listed." As he read the information one of his attendants had brought him on the people, Fisk scowled and thought about the idea. Bane. Real name unknown. Likes to represent himself as an adventurer. Height, 6 feet 8 inches. Weight, 350 pounds. Relative skills. Polylingual, brilliant, tactful, capable of summoning great strength. Background. Prison as child for father's crimes, escaped and went to work in Gotham as a freelancer. No recent arrests in past year. Cops had not been capable of restraining him, with either shackles or with straitjacket. Is still at large for numerous crimes. As he read the profile, Fisk shook his head. Judging from the blurry photo, the Bane man appeared to be just as strong as him. He questioned whether Naruto could defeat the giant if he faced it head-to head. Setting the file aside, he picked up the larger one on Deadshot, the criminal. Deadshot. Real name, Floyd Lawton, mercenary. Height, 6 feet 1 inch. Weight, 193 pounds. Relative skills. Expert with all firearms and projectile weapons as of date. Background. Childhood described as troubled as brother paralyzed father by mother's order, and Floyd killed brother. Mother then admitted to insane asylum in North Connecticut. Apparently has military background, and is known as one of the top 4 best marksmen in the world today. Arrested 12 times in past years for assassinations, released by other governments due to their political pulling, no real standing with any organization, usually works for the highest bidder. Setting the file aside, Fisk glanced around his desk to a large screen that allowed him to find his blonde retainer from anywhere. He would ask, and Penguin would call him back with a response. But first, let's call the young man back in. On the Bronx's less well-off side, with a dull interest, Naruto sat in a bar and watched a football game. Another blind, sighted idiot slammed into the ground, groaning in agony, and he moaned. Naruto detested this sport because the people of this planet had more pressing issues than simply running around playing games while onlookers stared in wonder. When he was alive, he was stronger than half of these idiots, and he was killed before he even turned 16. He glanced down at the scotch he had been sipping. A week prior, he had returned from Metropolis, where he was being pursued by the police. The Kingpin had flown him back here and warned him not to go because he would be needed soon. Since the alcohol had no effect on his demon blood, he drained the glass before placing it back on the table. As Naruto put another cigar in his mouth and wondered in his mind what Raven would say if she saw him now, the bartender returned and removed the glass, returning with another. His problem was that he hadn't seen the Dark Titan in 2 months. There was no time for them to escape and spend time together because he was working on increasingly difficult assignments for the Kingpin, and she and her team were having trouble with a group of criminals who went by the name Hive 5. After using her drinking and smoking powers to beat him into the ground and lecture him about how alcohol damages his liver and causes lung cancer, she would most likely be pleased to see him again. The thought of what she might think of to punish him made him shudder, and he extinguished the cigar in an ashtray on the bar. His leather jacket beeped as he finished his new scotch, and when he pulled out the beeping object, he discovered it was his dog tags. To let him know when Kingpin needed him, Kingpin had installed a high-frequency transmitter in the tags that would beep at a volume that only those nearby could hear. As he walked out, he placed a bundle of bills on the counter to prove to the bartender that he had made the payment. After that, he left the house and made his way to the location where the limo would always pick him up and drop him off when he was in New York. Naruto showed up just as his chauffeur arrived, opened the door for the blonde, and then relaxed as the limousine drove toward the Kingpin's building. He wondered if this mission would be more challenging than the last one, since he had kind of enjoyed the last one, save for the fact that those guards in supersits nearly sent him back to hell. When the limousine arrived, he let out a sigh and went to the top floor. When his secretary peeked through the door and announced that his associate had arrived, Fisk looked up. He waved him in, and Naruto was dragged into the room, flanked by 2 burly men in suits. They both nodded with Naruto as they walked away, saying, "Henry, Dominic, we have no use for you. I can take care of myself." Crushing 3 men's arms at once was no small feat, and Naruto had witnessed what the man was capable of with that bear hug move. He took a seat across from his supervisor and positioned himself comfortably. Naruto shrugged as the Kingpin pointed to a sizable briefcase on a pedestal that rose from the floor behind him. "Uzumaki, great job with the cloth and alloy last week from LexCorp. My scientists have already figured it out and have put together a little suit for you. Perhaps you will like this one better than the ones I asked you to wear to this building whenever I call." Naruto nodded as he got up and moved to the briefcase, opening it in preparation for its explosion. "Please tell me what you think," he asked. There was no explosion, or if there was, it happened very slowly. Glancing down at the suit, he snatched it up. The exterior was smooth and hardened, but the inside was surprisingly soft. It was black with 4 gray lines that met at the back and ran down the arms and legs of the pants. The black had a scale-like appearance and was slightly shiny. Naruto liked that it reflected no light because it made it easier to move stealthily when there were no light bursts from lamps or sunbeams. He inserted his hand into the shirt and jumped slightly as it molded to the precise shape of his hand. When you pulled it away, its shape returned to normal. Feeling indentations in the suit, Naruto ran a hand across his chest. Naruto lifted the fabric, placed it next to the case, and peered underneath it. Yes, the cloth is memory retaining, also protects from cold, heat, electricity, stabbing, extreme force, and most gunshots, as I am told the only thing that should get through is a tank round. Armor, titanium and glossy black. The chest plate, gauntlets, greaves, and what appeared to be a motorcycle helmet minus perhaps a fourth of its bulk and much more streamlined were all different from regular armor. He rapped his knuckles against it and nodded. The alloy and cloth were likely combined to give it its extreme strength and light weight. The black visor with only the targeting reticule on the outside was a nice touch, but he questioned whether it would affect visibility. He looked beneath the armor and nodded as he set it aside. To strengthen the breastplate, there appeared to be 2 bandoliers that could be attached to it. The bandoliers were lined with a number of pouches, two of which he discovered could be attached to the crossing bandoliers and the tiny pack that appeared to attach to the plate. Although he didn't find anything in the pack, it did have a holster underneath where he could store his gun, and the other pouches appeared to be fairly well stocked with almost everything Naruto might require. In order to conceal his ability to make weapons appear to everyone, he also had two sword sheaths that ran across his lower back. This would make it easier to get past the minor fact that he could call forth two highly reinforced weapons and place them inside. As he picked up the helmet and familiarized himself with it, he nodded. To make it even more difficult to get through, there is a sturdy Kevlar biweave between the alloy and the cloth. When he pressed the bottom of the back of the head, it sprang open and appeared to be especially simple to get on, revealing two laser-operated thumbprint scanners. After putting it on, Naruto turned his head and discovered that the omnisensor in the forehead of the helmet rotated the various lenses he might require: thermal, full color night vision, X-ray, and scope form, which was reportedly good enough to see the pea-sized pieces of lint on his boss's jacket. It also appeared to have an active link with the man downstairs who introduced himself and walked Naruto through the functions of the helmet. He also mentioned that his helmet could be used to send small shocks through the armor to boost the strength of the armor function so that he could move around on the seafloor unhindered, after he pointed out that the helmet had a rebreather built into it that would purify any air, no matter how polluted or poisoned, into normal air. Additionally, it would function as a flotation device and provide him with enough oxygen for 9 hours underwater before he was jettisoned to the surface via a tiny device at the back of the helmet that used the emergency air supply. He concluded by mentioning a vitals sensor, which showed his vitalsa from organs to bonessa on a tiny rectangle that moved with his eyes to ensure he never lost it. Additionally, if Mr. Fisk needed to do it by hand, it was voice recognizable and would send him a retrieval signal that he was in trouble. It was so helpful that they could actually evacuate him from almost anywhere he would be. The Kingpin's response surprised Naruto, who expressed his admiration for the armor to his boss and asked if he would like to test it on a group of soldiers. Naruto nodded as he arrived at each event and put everything away as he had taken it out before going back to his seat. "It is for you to utilize, my boy. Think of it as payment for you saving me from those disgraceful pictures in the New York Times," he said. "What do you need, sir? You brought me here for more than just to show me the new equipment you had outfitted for me." Fisk turned to face the boy, nodded, and took the files he had been examining in his hands. Fisk then took out two more vanilla files and slid them across the desk to Naruto, who opened them and started learning the information by heart. "I want you to test your new gear on a mission you may choose to accept or not. You will be working with these two characters if you agree. They are Gotham City criminals Mr. Freeze and Penguin." Fisk handed the files on Bane and Deadshot to the boy, and Naruto nodded as he read the one over the Penguin. "They have asked for your help and your services in an upcoming heist they have planned. You are needed to steal a small artifact and fight one of these two, if not both, in your escapade, if I am not mistaken." Oswald Chesterfield Cobblepot, a criminal, stock market trader, and suspected fixer, is Penguin's real name. 5 feet 2 inches tall, 175 pounds in weight. Relative abilities: extremely nimble, proficient with umbrella weapons, and able to communicate with birds. Background: Mother owned an exotic pet shop that specialized in birds from far-off places, which led to a troubled childhood filled with appearance-related ridicule. Maintained a public persona as a stock market investor while rising to a position of authority in the Gotham underworld. Later, he started a business of owning the Iceberg Lounge, a club. Arrested 3 times in the past year for racketeering and illegal gambling offenses. Renowned for being cunning and vicious. Naruto examined the file. The image of the Iceberg Lounge, which was a pretty place, the lists of people who had done business with the Scarletti Foundation and Wayne Enterprises, and he shook his head while glancing at his boss. As Naruto picked up the file over the one named Mr. Freeze, Fisk grinned at the joke. "This Birdman sounds like he is a few feathers short of a full wing, sir." Mr. Freeze. Professional criminal Victor Fries is his real name. 6 feet tall. This person weighs 190 pounds. Relative skills: able to use force, with a vast understanding of the human body and scientific domains. Background: a psychiatrist explained his strange fascination with freezing animals as a means of controlling his environment. Earned valedictorian honors upon graduating from college. After switching from body sciences to medicine in an attempt to find a cure for a strange illness, he was forced to wear cryogenic air conditioned armor or remain in a place that was 20 degrees below normal temperature due to an accident that severely frozen his body. He invented a cold gun that could quickly freeze a typical person to a block of ice and hyperfreeze a room to a temperature that he found comfortable. The fact that both the suit and the cold gun use diamonds as a power source is a critical flaw. He has robbing jewelry stores to fund his suit during the last 12 arrests. 9 visits to Arkham in the past year, 6 of which were because the man turned himself in after running out of fuel for his suit. This wasn't exactly what he had in mind. Naruto scowled as he perused the file, recalling Raven's description of a hero who used Gotham as his base. What was that man's name? Is there an issue, Uzumaki? Kingpin nodded as he pressed a button on his phone and a strange, nasal voice came in the other end. No sir, I think it's time we call this Penguin sir, before his offer is given away. Yes, what? This is Fisk, Penguin. Using the trademark name Naruto had given him, he said, I spoke with Death Dog, and he agreed to your mission. Is it still open? Is Fisk there? Of course. The voice inquired. He is seated across from me, yes. Naruto placed the briefcase containing his new lightweight uniform on the floor next to his chair and nodded, listening to our conversation. What should I call you? Him. My boss refers to me as Death Dog. You may call me Death Sir. I already like this guy, Death A. Do you have any rules for our little adventure, Fisk? Fisk sat back in his chair, looked at Naruto, shook his head, and then answered without saying anything. Death is a difficult ally to replace, so if he is arrested, he had better be released and returned to me undamaged. That's all I see. Does Death have any inquiries for the Penguin? With a nod, Naruto retrieved his coat and replaced his dog tags beneath his shirt. Mr. Penguin, is it correct that there is a crime fighter in Gotham City? Yes, Batman is very accustomed to the city. Why is that? As he asked the boy again, the nasally voice repeated the question. Will he be present to prevent us? The Bat does have an ability of popping up in places he isn't welcome, but if he does, both sides will try to take him down. It is an agreement we have. Mr. I don't mean to offend you, Penguin, but I'm really good at avoiding people who try to catch me, so if Batman appears, I'll stall him so you can get away. It's true that if everything goes awry, you'll get the Bat. However, if you agree, you will receive a fourth of what an outside consultant would get paid. Kingpin glanced at Naruto, who nodded, and as Naruto spoke into the phone, he gestured for his assistant to call a driver to the building. Mr. I'll be in Gotham before the night is over, Penguin. Where should we meet, sir? I will have a man meet you at Fisk's private hangar. They will bring you to my club, where we will plan this out. Till then, Mr. Death. When the phone rang and Naruto turned to face the Kingpin, he nodded. The Kingpin then got up and gave Naruto his last command. Naruto nodded to his boss as he picked up his briefcase and walked out of the room to the waiting car. Complete this mission, young man, and you will have gained quite a foothold for both yourself and me in the business that you have a talent for. At some point in the 2-hour journey from New York to Gotham. With a phone in one hand and a number dialed off of the other, Naruto sat in the back of the Kingpin's personal Learjet, hoping she would answer. He needed someone to help him who wouldn't betray him. Titan's Tower, California's Jump City Starfire was stirring something purple in a big bowl at the kitchen counter when the phone rang behind her, so she set the bowl down and picked it up. Hello, the home of Beast Boy, Raven, Starfire, Robin, and Cyborg. Speaking, friend Starfire, who is shouting? Cyborg took the phone, covering the mouthpiece with one hand, and blanched at this. Who is calling Star, not shouting, is the problem. Hello. Hello. Raven's friend Naruto here, Cyborg. Is she present so I can speak with her? After asking Starfire to go get Raven, Cyborg withdrew the phone from his ear and yelled. Friend Raven had the call to chat. Then, as Cyborg continued to speak to Naruto, she took off and flew off to fetch Raven. Where are you, Naruto? We know you had to leave abruptly, but you haven't had a chance to speak with any of us recently. Are things okay? Everything is fine, Cyborg. I am presently flying through the air in a company plane to a potential business agreement. Cyborg stood there waiting for a question to come up so he could ask it, but he was at a loss for words until Naruto spoke. You built your T-car correctly, Cyborg. Yes, but why? I was just wondering. I couldn't find a base car that matched the T-car and was wondering, wasn't trying to pry. As he watched Raven enter with Star half dragging the poor girl, he said, It's okay, man, it was just a question. Don't wait so long the next time. Raven is here. When you have some free time, come see us. Raven took the phone from Cyborg and held it to her ear, saying, Will do. Starfire was bouncing on her toes and beginning to fly until Cyborg pulled her from the room so she could speak quietly. A Raven? Where are you, Naruto? I'm here. She heard a squawk, then nothing, and she asked as she noticed a green bird pecking at the glass window outside, which she had covered with the blinds. I needed someone to talk to while I was flying to Gotham City. How are you? His voice was a little strained as he asked. Naruto, are you okay? You seem exhausted. When was the last time you slept? She asked, noticing right away. Too long. Once I get to the hotel, I'll go to sleep. Additionally, since I will be in Gotham, I would like you to research this legendary Batman for me." A demonized Naruto smashing Batman's skull between its paws and then yelling, "Fatality!" was the image that Raven silently brought to mind. She heard some banging from the floor below and shuddered. "I'll speak with you later, Raven. I'm heading ashore. I cherish you." The power to the tower floor cut off just as Raven was about to respond, and the blonde demon unintentionally hung up. Airport in Gotham City, Hangar 27. Naruto glanced at the phone, wondering if she had heard him say he loved her or if she didn't care that he had said it. As he heard the pilot call out, he felt his plan for a pep talk backfire and a hole form in his stomach. "Sir, 4 men are searching for a death dog outside. Are you prepared?" As he opened the briefcase and took out the uniform, Naruto shook his head, pushing the conversation from his thoughts and shooing the man away. After 10 minutes, Naruto discovered that a button on the right side of his helmet projected light from all around him, making him virtually invisible to everything but sonic sensors. He pulled on the helmet, waited for it to airlock, and he was ready, heard the hiss, and then he left the plane. Naruto was dressed entirely in black, including his pants, shirt, bandoliers, greaves, gauntlets, chest plate, and pack. When he spoke, the synthesizers in his helmet worked to block out the men's voices. Penguin's men were waiting for him around a shiny luxury car, and they were a little alarmed by the figure in the all-black suit and the impressive-looking headgear. "The men of Penguin?" The group nodded, saying, "All right, I'm Death Dog. Let's go. We don't want to keep my business partner and your boss waiting, do we?" They shook their heads, opened the car for Naruto in his new combat suit, and prayed that the man wouldn't be as angry as their boss was. They were a little afraid of the man's potentially dangerous-looking weapons. The black motorcade passed through downtown Gotham without incident. None of the numerous vehicle checkpoints established by the city since villains had developed a habit of causing cars to blow up on the freeways stopped or examined them. Because he was in no mood to play games with these henchmen and was here to assist the Birdman for his boss, Death. I am referring to Naruto by this while he is in his suit, sat in the back of the car, not moving an inch. This seemed to frighten out the Penguin's men more than usual. Death slowed down significantly as the driver turned onto a well-lit side street and peered out at a large building that undoubtedly had the appearance of a villainous penguin's icy home. He scowled beneath his mask as he gazed up at the lounge. The building was 2 stories, and if the file accessed by Death's helmet was accurate, it was approximately 12,800 square feet. It appeared to be carved out of steel, glass, and real ice. After exiting the vehicle, the men turned to face the assassin-like figure in the black suit before turning to face one another and one of them starting a conversation. "Mr. We'll go inside and let the boss know you're here, Death sir. Please wait here, I suppose," the man said, unsure of how to explain to the boss that a super thief in a black suit was entering his club. Before the light changed and he disappeared, the helmeted figure turned back to face the group of men, got out of the car, and stood in the middle of the circle. "I'll go in with your group. That's not required. I can be completely hidden from the lounge's patrons thanks to my suit abilities. I dislike being kept waiting now that I'm inside." The group watched it with apathy until the leader felt a sharp poke to the back of his neck, and they all rushed inside the building with an Arctic theme. The men nodded as they entered the building, and the car drove off, screeching as it peeled around a corner. The Penguin's penthouse on the top floor of the Iceberg Lounge. Dear Commissioner Gordon sat across from Oswald Cobblepot, asking seemingly pointless questions about the Arkham jailbreak a few nights prior, while detectives and police officers sat in his waiting room, making Cobblepot unhappy. "I wasn't present for the final time, Commissioner. What would I know about a jailbreak at Arkham while I was at my summer residence in Montreal? I am now a law-abiding business owner, not a criminal." Gordon was about to apologize for the implication when Penguin answered the desk phone's beep. "Yes?" They waited a moment till the voice finished. "Really? Tell them we are not serving any more wine from that year for the time being, and I will take care of that when I finish up with our beloved Commissioner. Excellent." As he turned to go, Gordon shook his head and gave the Penguin one final glance. "Mr. Cobblepot, please notify the police if you hear from any of your former contacts." As the Commissioner departed, the short man nodded and sighed. "It is our sworn duty to protect Gotham from any dangers. With their infernal snooping, damnable cops can't seem to get any of my business done." He was about to pick up his phone when someone else entered. "Now it's time to call the boys and check if Fisk's associate had arrived yet." Penguin heard a breathing apparatus being used and looked up to see Mr. Freeze standing there. "No, Mr. Commissioner, I don't have any other news, sorry." "If you believed I was the man who left after a minute of running, Penguin, you're starting to lose your sense of reality." It appears that he disliked the cold He busted the idiot out of Arkham, gave him his payment as soon as he agreed, and the man had been a hindrance since then. Good God, this was almost as bad as dealing with that clown freak the Joker. Penguin slapped his face and glared at the man in the cryogenic freezing armor across from him. Penguin shuddered as he thought that, but on second thought, nothing is that bad. Penguin picked up the phone as it rang out again, but the walking refrigerator remained silent. Listen, Freeze, I broke you out to help me, not to make snide comments. While the two sat there listening, there was a frantic squabbling on the other end. Penguin here. Penguin turned to Freeze, who nodded and answered, Boss, the man from New York is here, he is in the lounge. As they both turned to face the door, he said, Go ahead and send him in. Regretfully, a moment later, the figure emerged from the couch and observed them gazing at the door. As they both turned to face him, a metallic voice said, I think you're searching for me in the wrong way. While Penguin and Freeze stared at him, Death sat in the chair and blamed the cooler unit that appeared to be blowing out freezing air from the man's back for the lack of air in the room. You are Fisk's man, Death, correct? Asked Penguin, who had recovered first, as he extended his hand. The shadowed figure shook the little man's hand without crushing his fingers and nodded. Then, despite the frost covering his glove as it touched the man's suit, he shook Freeze's hand in return. Well, good that you are both here. We can go into planning this little midnight escapade. After all, Death has only the smallest inkling to our mission. Now let's look at the objective. Death lifted a photograph as the two approached, and Penguin took a folder from his desk. The items we are after are called the Choker of Ceylon, the Spirit of the Arctic, and the Laganolian Urn. Freeze here will be working with us. He is helping me in turn of getting the Spirit of the Arctic. I will sell the urn and the choker. You will be paid from the profits I have posted for the buyer. The only catch is we have to get it before someone, namely the Underground and the Batman, beat us to it. Death examined the image of the three items together. A plain clay urn with no decorations, a bronze and leather choker adorned with pearls, and a striking bright blue diamond on a silver chain. He gave them another glance. Death shook his head, and the Penguin grinned. So we will make our move later tonight, unless you need some time to be prepared, Mr. Death? The two of them nodded once more as Freeze walked out the door and Death disappeared without a word. Very good, here is the location to the museum. We will both be there tonight at 10, and hopefully we won't have any bats in that old building's basement if you catch my drift. Penguin summoned his floor manager to his office and remarked, Really ought to put a bell on that guy. He is too quiet for his own good. About an hour's drive from the museum, in a hotel. Slouched in a rigid wooden backed chair, Naruto gazed at the helmet on the table across from him. With the empty vodka bottles rolling around the floor of the hotel room, he was currently a little out of his element. He stared at the mask while holding a half-empty one in his hand. His life's memories were returning more quickly now. He had retrieved them all up until his first Anbu mission, when the container for the seven-tailed demon killed his poor Hinata. He loved her the way a man could love a woman he couldn't have, even though he didn't love her as much as he loved Raven. When a wave of extremely hot chakra turned her, Kiba, and their friend Shoji into ashes, he only survived with severe burns. His demonically influenced self had spoken the word that haunted him as he left them to burn after he had been asleep until their faces woke him up, pleading with him to save them. No, he said, taking a sip. No, he said, taking a bigger sip. No, he said, swallowing it whole. No, he exclaimed as he started to down the substance as if it would silence the voice in his head. No, MMMWWWWAHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHHhe collapsed to his knees and searched for more alcohol. There was a bottle in the corner that he discovered. He got to his knees and grabbed it. He fought to remove the top until he lost patience and tore the fucking neck off of it. He flipped it over and drank the flaming liquid and the shards of glass that shattered from the partially ruined bottle. Glass fragments flew from his bleeding mouth as he coughed up some of it, the dull pain of the alcohol mingling with his blood. He landed on his back, causing the room to tremble, and then his headgear thumped on the floor once more. Looking at the wall clock, He realized he couldn't sleep and that he had 2 hours to prepare for his attempt to steal the urn. He got up, went into the bathroom, and threw himself into the bathtub. He turned on the freezing water and lay there in just his sweatpants, wondering in silence why he had to be the scapegoat for all of his friends and loves, why he should bear the pain that should be shared equally by the entire country, and why the many gods and goddesses of this damn existence had done this to him. His friends and loves died either after he met them or were ripped from his life for something else that they didn't deserve to happen to him. As he collapsed in the icy water, he thought this. Titan's Tower, California, the operations room. Raven was reading a book while seated on the couch. Starfire was at the mall while the boys went to watch a basketball game in town. She pondered her options. If Naruto were present, they would most likely be cuddling on her room's half couch. She looked up with a sigh. It had been roughly 2.5 months since she had last seen her lover. It didn't seem to happen, but she wished he had more time off from whatever it was he had found to do. As one of her bangs dropped in front of her face, she exhaled and gazed up at the half moon that was high above her, giving the night an unsettling gleam. Unable to concentrate on reading, she set her book aside and began to meditate, her words soon reverberating throughout the tower. Naruto, please come back to me. I love you. I hope you still love me. City of Gotham's rooftops. Naruto was perched on a ledge overlooking Gotham City's streets, with the museum directly below. He used a wireless interference blocker in his helmet to turn off the alarm system until he was ready to sneak in, but his friends had already done so and were on their way. In addition to the fact that he had detected the heat signature up here and had come to investigate, he reasoned that it would be safer for Penguin and Freeze to have retrieved their belongings before he entered and reactivated the alarms because he would lose the height that allowed it. He glanced down the wire, where Deadshot, the marksman, was hanging tied up like a Christmas ham. Using a sleeping solution to the weaker fabric at the base of his shoulders, he had sneaked up on the idiot and rendered him unconscious. He suspected that the one named Bane would be waiting for him on the upper floor, where the urn was stored, since one of them was down. After all, the museum was owned by his criminal underground boss, who would not tolerate being robbed blind. Using his internal radio receiver, Naruto heard the Penguin say, "Death, we are in and out. We wait for you at the dock where the items are going to be shipped off." Naruto leaned down to listen. Naruto put on his helmet and nodded. He locked it in place by pressing the buttons on the back. As he rogered the Penguin and jumped off the ledge toward the building, he waited for the functions to activate. Beneath his mask, Death grinned as its sensors informed him of the speed of the air, the speed of his descent, and the precise location of his landing on the enormous standing glass window. The wind caught him as his fall slowed, and he threw his arms out to his sides. He started to flip constantly until he hit the grass without even cracking. He looked down into the dark room and adjusted his sensors after checking his helmet and finding that the adrenaline levels had barely increased from the fall. In addition to the giant he assumed to be Bane, he could see 4 regular guards. He extracted 2 small smoke bombs from his bandolier. With an unseen smile, he took a small knife that looked like a scalpel from his packet and cut out a large rectangle of the window. Then he lifted it and silently slid it to the side before dropping both smoke bombs in. After losing communication with the guards on the first 2 floors, Bane scowled as smoke filled the room. It was not to his liking. As one of the men was jerked into the escalating smoke, he clenched his fists. When Bane heard the man's gun go off and then scream, he ducked lower. Then, with the speed of a battering ram, he saw the man slam into the wall after being pitched from the smoke. 2 more were yanked inside the deepening darkness as he turned. When he turned to see the 3 men sitting against the wall, hostage tied in rope, their legs zip-tied, he received no response to his words. "Come over here and guard the urn. I will take care of this intruder." His neck protruded at an odd angle when he turned to face the other. He retreated until he felt the podium's base brush against his heels. As the smoke cleared, he raised his fists. The intruder was standing there. Bane didn't recognize him, so it was clear he wasn't from Gotham, but if he was able to eliminate all those men with minimal effort, then his efficiency was excellent. He faced the figure in the black suit and steadied himself. Death didn't wait for introductions. He leapt forward and kicked the giant twice with his heels in the chest, stopping him in his tracks and causing his neck to stiffen. That was enough warning to avoid a hammer. Like fist from hell. As the little bastard slid beneath him and kicked his chin like a rising star, Bane swore. Unaware of the black silhouette swinging a sarcophagus at him and knocking him across the room, he stumbled a little and shook his head to regain feeling. He was thrown forward carelessly as the figure jumped on his back and delivered a double overhand blow to his neck, destroying a valuable artifact from before the time of Christ. After glancing at the smoke and nodding, Death decided he couldn't let that go. He turned to face the urn and, using his hand, liquefied the glass until it formed a puddle around it. He then raised it beneath his arm and turned. He was wearing a strange outfit as he made his way to the door. A big cowl and cape, black boots and elbow-length gloves, gray tight-fitting spandex, and a yellow utility belt around his waist. The black bat-like symbol on this man's chest was most likely the signal that identified him. With a no-nonsense tone, the man said, "You made my job easier by taking out Bane. Now do yourself a favor and turn yourself in." Death simply tipped his head to the side, then laid the urn down and raised his arms against the Dark Knight. Batman nodded before charging and hurling a batarang at the black figure. Death dodged the bat's swinging sweep kick and caught the flying weapon. However, he didn't believe he had enough time to avoid a blow that would have knocked the thief to his knees. Death lifted a pair of spade-shaped knives from his bandolier and flipped them into reverse as he leapt from his back to a standing position, only to have to jump over another Batman punch. Batman lunged forward, knocked one of the knives out of the living Shadow's hands, and watched the knives warily. To his surprise, the thief jumped back into handstand, body level with the ground, and kicked the caped Crusader in the face, sending him flying back with blood streaming from his nose, which was now at an odd angle. He was about to grab the other when a sharp pain erupted in his shoulder and he noticed the knife sticking from his back. Before his feet flipped behind him and he immediately got back up, he saw the figure holding himself in the air while seated. From his bandoliers, 3 thrown discs made their way into his hands. Batman started to circle with the now ninja-like figure, but he took a step back. Their punches landed as he struck out simultaneously. The ninja figure struck him in the stomach, and his fell on the ninja's upper chest. He coughed blood onto the floor as his stomach heaved. The Shadow did not respond when the Dark Knight dropped the knife from his shoulder and re-entered position. "You don't seem to be an ordinary criminal. Why are you helping the villains rob this museum?" This time, Death didn't attempt to circle. Instead, it appeared to increase the likelihood that the crime fighter would strike more forcefully and quickly. Batman grabbed him and threw him across the room as he launched himself into a thrust kick. Before crashing into the wall, he threw it into the air and ran down it, jumping away from it and landing on a statue of a sitting pharaoh. After beckoning the Batman, he had to avoid multiple batarangs that were hurled at his head, sending them straight back into the Dark Knight's waiting, charging hands. The Knight swung at him, trying to surreptitiously attach a tracker to him, but Death ducked once more. To the Batman's surprise, Naruto grabbed the tracker out of the air when he saw it. After crushing it in his hand, he used that hand to punch Batman. Batman fell backwards and then launched a hook to save himself with his grappling gun, but the Shadow cut the wire as he passed it on his way down. Batman cracked the ground beneath him and landed with a thud. He was unconscious when the Shadow touched his neck after landing next to him. His victory over the legendary Dark Knight would be heard by the criminals in the Justice League when the Bat awoke. Grabbing the fallen man and tossing him over his shoulder, Death shook his head. After removing the enormous black bat symbol from his chest with a tiny razor he took from his bandolier, he pocketed the reinforced material. Then, carrying the unconscious combatant to the alley behind the museum, he discovered the man's Batmobile parked there, as he had suspected. In addition to the injuries he had inflicted, he noticed that Batman appeared to have more serious wounds before the fight. In fact, he pressed the button on his belt to activate his Batmobile. Unceremoniously, he dropped the man into the seat and pushed a button on the steering mechanism. "Yes, sir?" the voice on the other end said, and Death's eyes narrowed. As he filed the voice away for later analysis, he shook this off his mind. He heard an elderly man gasp, "This is not the sir you're thinking of." He was terrified from beginning to end. He engaged the autopilot by pressing the buttons on the Batmobile's control center. "Your sir has been defeated to a level of unconsciousness and is being sent back to whatever base of operations he has. I expect that you will be able to take care of him?" The man asked in a slightly concerned tone. "Yes, but why are you helping him? What do you plan to gain from this?" "I want a rematch to where the Dark Knight is not half beaten when he reaches me, though it will be no time soon. I will need to recover. Also, young Robin in Jump City would probably want me to pass on his regards as I am visiting his home, and have defeated his dear mentor. Inform him I am going after him next, then whatever other superhero I find a suitable match." The voice asked, "Who are you?" as he noticed that the Batmobile was ready to depart after nearly finishing its systems check. Death then leapt from the car as its rear thrusters engaged and it shot off into the night, saying, "I am Death Dog, and I will be back, sir." With a nod, he took a low-level explosive from his belt and returned to the museum, where he still needed to retrieve an urn. Later that evening, at the docks, the Choker was in a briefcase across from Penguin as he sat in his car. Freeze had already left, had gotten what he wanted, and was long gone. Currently, he was awaiting the arrival of Fisk's man so that he could proceed with his business with his person. He looked at his watch and moaned when he heard a tap on the windshield. It was almost midnight. Perhaps he ought to have warned the man that there was a time limit. As he gazed out his window, he considered this. Fisk's man was there, but he had nothing. When the figure pointed to his right, Penguin was about to lose it and was unsure of how to respond. He turned to see the urn being securely placed in a crate. As the man took another item out of his pocket, he let out a sigh. His cigarette fell out of his mouth as soon as he saw it unravel. It was covered in blood and was a component of Bad Brain's costume. He knew it was bad blood based on the fact that he was not even slightly hurt. The man extended his hand when he reached for it. With a nod, Penguin handed Death a briefcase through the window, which he opened to reveal the $10,000 bricks inside. He gave a nod, slipped the bat costume piece back into his bandoliers, and vanished into a distorted ray of light. He was eager to return home. Hangar 47 at Gotham Airport, across town. Naruto nodded to the pilot as he sat down in the aircraft after walking down the tarmac. He was on his way to Jump City after returning to New York. Since he had just defeated Batman, he needed to see his Raven. Immediately. If that wasn't worth taking a break, he didn't know it was. Given that he completed it perfectly and that the Birdman's face indicated that there would be some repeat business, perhaps Kingpin would give him a bonus. The Templar soldiers watched as the Mongols paused their conquest of the landmark as the night grew dark and the snow topped the castle on the ledge. It was icy, gloomy, and genuinely derogatory. The Mongols were relentless in their attack, and Naruto saw from the walkways as they prepared for another attack on the gate. His group had lost half of its men, and all of their archers were resting, nearly exhausted and half dead. His second-in-command ran toward him, and he sighed. His larynx sprouted an arrow, and he fell to the ground, saying, "My liege, they're overrunning the courtyard. We have already lost the barricades. Our men won't survive many more Ada. UGHH." With a curse, Naruto reached for a shield as he felt the familiar thumps of arrows hitting the wood. He used his mace to beat down two irate Mongols who were charging up the stairs. He turned to see that the Mongols had scaled the walls and taken ladders, and they were now pouring over the battlements. Naruto kicked another foot soldier off the wall and used his mace to crush another. When an arrow emerged from his clavicle as he turned to knock someone else away, he fell to the ground and turned to see a man approaching him with a bow at his side. The man was possibly a little under 200 pounds, standing at 5 feet 10 inches. He looked at the blonde as he collapsed to his knees, his long black hair hanging in great dirty links, braided in with strips of bone and fur. His dark, menacing brown eyes resembled those of a tortured demon who relished the experience because it made him stronger. Naruto genuinely detested creatures such as these. Two more grabbed his arms and pushed his head to the floor as he looked up. Grinning, the man took the blonde demon's head in his hand and turned to face Naruto. He smirked when he squeezed it and saw no reaction. Naruto tilted his head to the side and looked up at him, saying, "I know what you area." As the man drew a silver dagger from his belt and grinned knowingly, Naruto registered the shock. "Demon brood. Know that you lost your human tether to the man who achieved the title of Khan, and don't bring any of your backwards brethren to this world. Now die and spread the fear of Vander ADG." He drew the blade across the blonde's neck after grabbing his hair and pulling his face back. When Naruto awoke and looked out the window, he could see the outline of the Titan's tower from the window of the jet as he approached Jump City. Wondering why that memory had brought it to the forefront, he sighed and leaned back in an attempt to meditate once more. As the plane started to descend, he shook his head. "I can see my Raven. And I'm almost home." Naruto descended the stairs, looked around, and came to a stop as the plane touched down. The Titan stood opposite him, armed and prepared. He was grateful that he had his armor on. The boy wonder appeared to be very upset. Rewind. Robin sat at the control panel, examining Slade's actions and attempting to piece together the man's next move. He scowled and displayed the city map once more. He sighed in disappointment after following the locations of the previous few robberies. He sighed once more. His emblem began to beep just as he was ready to try again. Looking down at the R on his uniform, he froze and pressed the emblem right away, he said. Speaking into the patch, he said, "Robin here." The voice said, "Tim, we have a problem." Robin coughed up his coffee. "Batman?" His mentor gave him a hushed, "Yes." As he listened to a rasping cough coming from the other end of the line, Robin asked, "What made you contact me?" "There was a break-in the Gotham Museum of Antiquities. The items are easy enough to track. The reason I need your help is, well, Penguin hired some out-of-town consultant. Some sort of assassin or mercenary anyway. I have talked to some of my contacts and found he is on a plane to your city. Robin, apprehend the person, but be careful, your team may need to be extra vigilant." Robin looked up and began gathering supplies for the pockets on his belt. The team then departed to cross the plain after he called them. Finish the flashback. The group disembarked from the aircraft and stood opposite the assassin. Everyone had been informed that he was capable of defeating Batman. It's likely that the Justice League was already preparing to catch and arrest him. These titans were all observing him and attempting to capture him. Except for one who only wanted him to be within nibbling range and shirtless. When Naruto saw Raven staring at him, his perspiration stopped. Naruto swore that his karma had just been Ked 6 ways to Sunday after she flashed a cheeky grin. He pulled a scimitar from behind him and aimed it at the group while he hung his head. Naruto instantly regretted the last one as the green shape. Shifter changed from a gorilla to a velociraptor and back again. I don't have time to play games with children. I am tired, and I am cranky. Don't make me hurt you children. Titans go. The traffic cone shouted as it posed. A sonic generator blasted Naruto after he leapt aside to avoid the dinosaur. When he saw a barrage of starbolts blast him into the tarmac, he swore and glared at his smoking uniform. With a sigh, he hurled a dagger at Cyborg, causing his arm to malfunction and explode. This time, he avoided Beast Boy like an ox after turning and kicking Starfire away from him. He gracefully flipped away, dodging another surge of black energy. Robin immediately pounced on him, swinging his staff ferociously. The staff caught the blade in Naruto's guard as he swerved to the left. In order to maintain appearances and avoid giving away too much, he kicked the bird boy away with a low-level concussive explosive. He then turned and threw a bolo at the big saber cat that was attempting to ambush him. Dodging a barrage of starbolts and the cyborg's punch, he leapt across the tarmac. Raven skidded about 40 feet after he jumped behind her, wrapped her cloak around her head, and gave her a light kick. Reaching into his pouch, he saw another volley coming at him. He took out a tiny, black object that resembled an egg and crushed it in his hand before dropping it to the ground. Beast Boy was rendered unconscious by the stench of the extremely dark black fog that suddenly filled the tarmac. The black smoke made both Robin and the cyborg unconscious, and Robin coughed. As it emerged from the smoke, Starfire flew slowly and lost altitude before tumbling and rolling across the earth. As she concentrated on blowing away the smoke, Raven caught a faint whiff of it as it dispersed and saw her lover standing on the edge of the air park. Naruto waved over his head. She praised her boyfriend's inventiveness and almost puked at the stench. His use of the smoke from burning corpses in Hellfire was disgusting and had the potential to make anyone near death unconscious, ill, or even dead if consumed in large amounts. It must have been conjured by him and then compressed into that tiny pellet. He was clever and cunning, and he was also very attractive. She hardly smiled. With a sigh, she set aside time to gather her friends and teleport them to the tower. A tiny drone was floating around the tarmac, bringing information to its source. It made a few languid circles before shimmering out of view, but none of the parties in the area noticed. Standing in his apartment, Naruto drew sigils on the walls while holding a jar of sheep's blood. He sensed that people, not just anyone, were gravitating toward him. People with magic and exorcism skills would want a demon to do their dirty work, and they would send them to hell if they couldn't bend him. Naruto was aware of the type and had taken risks in the previous few months, so he wasn't foolish enough to announce his position. In order to avoid being discovered by the people he had robbed for Fisk, he had to be extremely cautious going forward and remain hidden for a while. When he heard the warehouse door open, he went to the work table, turned around, and hid behind a pillar. Looking, he swore at what he saw. Raven wondered what exactly was on his mind as he strolled through the warehouse. Apartment, he said. Where in hell did he think this was normal? He had one more thing to answer for, and this was it. Her hands moved to her side, where the kick had caused some bruising. This, she reasoned, would be the best place to find him. Where had he gone? She looked around again and said, Naruto, how in the hell am I supposed to keep in contact with you? It seemed to be a reasonably livable place. Charmingly, he had carved protective sigils on the walls of the bedroom, bathroom, and sparse furniture. He is going to get it. Naruto waved to her as he came out from behind the pillar. Grinning, she approached him. After too much time apart, Naruto extended his arms to embrace her. His breath brushed over her shoulders, causing her knees to weaken. As she moved away, he grinned, and then it happened. She had cold-cocked him by putting her knee right in his groin, causing him to fall to the ground while clutching his groin. He tried to ignore the pain by making halting noises. She nodded as she inspected his bookshelf on his wall. There were a ton of books there. She turned back to face the blonde, who had at last caught his breath. Naruto scowled at her and seated himself in a chair. That was for the kick and the bruising, he said. As he nursed his groin, she returned to him. Raven blushed and stumbled as Naruto laughed. Is it going to be okay? He asked, looking at her. It's not like I will use it anytime soon. I have more wooing and sweet talking to do before I get to that. As Raven scowled at him, he went to his kitchenette and put a kettle for tea while laughing. Grinning, he went to prepare a simple lunch. City. At Luthor Corp's headquarters, Lex Luthor sat in his office. He was reviewing the business briefs that had been conducted during his business trip. He carefully examined each one, creating flawless mental images of each form in his mind. He finally put them aside because he found them boring. On his box, he noticed a manila envelope. With a sigh, he picked it up and used his letter opener, an ancient ceremonial Tibetan priestess Daguerre, to cut it open. He scowled as he poured out the materials he had gathered. He put aside the surveillance footage that was on a disc. He picked up the packet and a bag of fine, dark material that looked like sand. Luthor read it through to the end, saying, "To Mr. Luthor, we regret to inform you OFA." Grabbing the pamphlet, he tossed it across his office. He slammed his hands on his desk and shook them angrily. Luthor strutted around his office desk, plugged in the disc, and set up his viewing screen. "They stole my fabric and alloy. I was going to sell it to the government. Damn it," he exclaimed. The exterior of the building, the corridor leading to the test area, and the vault used to store and safeguard his materials were all shown on the screen as it came to life. He saw a figure running across the floor toward the door while wrapped in black cloth. Without stopping his run, he threw 2 knives and removed his guards. He then leapt to his feet, grabbed the window sill, and threw himself through the window feet first. The man was dead before he hit the ground, so he drew a small knife and cut through his hand, then carried the bleeding hand and used it to activate the palm scanner that opened the door. He landed silently, sneaked up behind his guard, and twisted his neck 360 degrees. He killed all of his lab technicians in silence, and just as a woman was about to scream, 2 knives appeared in her throat. After realizing that the thief had severed the woman's vocal cords, Lex shuddered and moved past the gasping victim to the prototypes, who were chained to the table. In less than 6 seconds, the man picked up both locks. Luthor leaned closer, picked up both Attache copyright cases, and made his way to the exit. As his security team entered the room, Lex grinned. To his amazement, he disassembled all of the weapons before his men could fire and used an open palm strike to cut off one's spine. The last fell to the ground bleeding, and the next was stabbed in the eye. He knocked the man to his knees, and Luthor winced. After removing a grenade from the man's belt, the murderer placed it in his mouth. After tying a wire to the pin and leaving the room, the pin was removed. When the man screamed and spat out the grenade, the camera screen went to static and the grenade detonated. With his fingers steeped, Lex took a seat at his desk. He was a professional. He was well trained, in and out, and Luthor examined his impresario's Luthor Corp model watch. A minute and a half later, just as planned, Luthor opened a small safe behind him and took out a cell phone. Who is this person? Well, whoever he is, he was about to pay. No one crosses Lex Luthor. After pressing an auto dial button, a voice message appeared a few seconds later. "This is Talia al Ghul." He heard a whistle and said, "Yes, this is Lex Luthor. I would like to hire the League." Luthor grimaced and asked, "Who crossed you, Mr. Luthor?" "I don't have a name, but I have a recommendation." "Yes, Mr. Luthor, always happy to take a recommendation from one of our financiaries." After hearing a resounding yes, Luthor grinned and said, "I am sending the information I have. I want this to be handled by the demon's hand. Then I want to be informed of your progress, by the demon's head." Luthor chuckled as he pictured the assassin's head at his feet and said, "I have you now, you dreadful little bastard." The lair of the demon. When Talia watched the video, she was astounded to see that he moved without pausing or showing any emotion. If her guess was correct, he was superior to her. The head needed to see this. She got up from her desk in the office and made her way to the throne room via the stone corridor. "What do you want, daughter?" she asked, bowing as she turned to face her father, who was seated on the throne. He had an old book he was reading. She shivered as he looked up. The League of Assassins was led by Ra's al Ghul, also known as the Demon Head. No one on the planet was able to avoid his grasp of death and his innate knowledge of it, as his hand extended over the whole planet. He had cold, piercing blue eyes and a full head of gray hair with white streaks. His sword skills were unmatched, and in certain nations, his hand-to hand-fighting prowess was legendary. As she showed her father the paper and Luthor's video, Talia bowed and waited anxiously, asking, "What is it, my daughter?" Her father would either kill the new assassin or immediately take him under his wing if he showed any interest. Both had enormous potential and a host of other repercussions. Ra's face slowly stretched into a smile as he watched the video. He gave his daughter a nod. Almost all of his teeth were visible in his smile. "Let's put him to the test. Send Merlin and 2 of his guards right away to see if we can get the boy to demonstrate his full potential. Oh, and send Lady Shiva too." I want to see how skilled this young man is in every way." Knowing better than to try to change her father's mind, Talia bowed to him and walked away, saying, "God help this poor boy." Her father was a great stone of decision, and only defeat could make him change his mind. Jump City. As he watched the Titans run through their obstacle course, Naruto shrugged as Robin destroyed another training block. He had been using his ability to try and find more pages of the Necronomicon, and he had actually found a high concentration, meaning numerous pages, but he couldn't pinpoint them because he didn't want to hunt them down because they were probably protected by a powerful entity. As Raven took a seat beside him, Naruto grinned and said, "Looks like he's still steaming, from you taking him apart." Well, he was facing a man who beat the Batman. As he watched the Dark Knight's apprentice fail a rolling spin kick, Naruto remarked, "It's a frustrating feeling. I think he feels like he failed his mentor." Raven looked at Naruto sideways and said, "Is it weird that I am very attracted by the fact you defeated one of the greatest superheroes in the world?" Naruto shrugged and said, "He was injured before I went at him." She blushed as he leaned in, but she pushed him away, pointing to Cyborg. Naruto shrugged. "Doesn't change all that much, in my opinion." Raven turned to face Naruto. Robin always said that he was the greatest detective, and that he was capable of fighting off so many thugs even with his injuries. Maybe he should have just left them alone. Oh well, he would just apologize and talk to the blonde tomorrow. Cyborg was smiling at the two, but Naruto maintained his composure and Raven looked down. Naruto then stood and walked towards the jetty to go to the mainland, while Raven went to the tower. It would be nice if he didn't have to be chased from hell and back. Naruto was walking through Central Jump City, thinking about whether he should avoid heroes until the heat subsided or perhaps have a Raven sit in for a vacation. He needed a break, to lay low. When he froze, he shrugged, spun around, and grabbed his tail by the throat. When he rasped out something incomprehensible, it was Beast Boy. Naruto released him, and Beast Boy dropped to the ground. "Why are you following me?" Beast Boy rubbed his throat and coughed. The shapeshifter picked himself up and said, "I just wanted to know more about you and Raven." Naruto assessed him, knowing how many creatures the Green Boy had at his disposal, having been eaten by some of them and hunted the others. "Why is it important to you? She is my teammate and our friend." Robin is unsure of your motivations, but I am aware that you are her friend, and she is not a person who readily makes friends. Everyone except Robin supports you, but she doesn't unwind like the rest of us because of all the problems we face from the various villains. Like a flower needs the sun, so does she need you. Beast Boy looked at him in the hopes that his sincere request would not be ignored. "Please don't take what we say, she needs you." With a serious expression on his face, Naruto nodded and said, "I will stay and help the Titans, but I stay for Raven most." Beast Boy, unsure of how to process this new information, nodded slowly before being snatched by his shirt and thrown over Naruto's shoulder. "She is the reason I have stayed so long. I gave up my way of life for her." When Beast Boy's head turned to nod, Naruto saw that he was running at the two with a katana. Following his instincts, Naruto pulled Beast Boy aside and moved forward. "This means no repercussions," Naruto said, smirking as the assassin swung down with his katana. This was a magical construct. It had no heartbeat, and it had no breathing. He stepped aside as the blade made a thin line in the concrete. "Whoa, that's really sharp. Shall we call for assistance?" This time, the figure thrust, and Beast Boy closed his eyes as he watched the blade fly toward the blonde demon. He winced and then opened one eye after hearing a sound of vibrating metal. Naruto shook his head. Beast Boy glanced at Naruto, who was examining the attacker's blade. Naruto stood by the figure's side, his sword hand in a reverse locking grip. He struck the figure in the neck, sending him to the ground before scattering in a cloud of dark smoke. Expertly crafted, stainless steel, poison-lined. They both stood there as police started to arrive on the scene, alongside Robin's motorcycle and the T-car, and the chief of police approached them. "This blade is not the tool of an amateur," he said. "Did you witness what transpired, sir?" As the man and the Titans went to see how Beast Boy was doing, Naruto glanced at them. The chief nodded as Robin hurried over. "A figure attacked me and Beast Boy from the alleyway. Beast Boy was knocked aside and I disarmed him, but he disappeared." "What took place? Are you hurt? Did he hit you?" With Robin's brow furrowed, Naruto shook his head as he noticed Raven observing him and checking him for injuries. "Do you think you would be okay at home?" Robin nodded, which seemed more in line with what he was used to, but Naruto shook his head, pausing just before acknowledging that there were likely more waiting for him and that he needed to get some stuff. They nodded and went to the car, followed by Naruto. Raven whispered, "Beast Boy, Cyborg, go with Naruto to his home and see that he makes it to the tower. We are going to keep him under watch until we know who we are dealing with." "I don't like this, Naruto." Why are you being singled out? Robin went to the police chief to get the assassin's weapon and record the incident after Naruto glanced at her and shrugged. She nodded, indicating that they would speak later. While the Titans in the front seat discussed the events, Naruto rode in the back, feigning to be asleep and worn out from the ordeal. Naruto grinned slightly and said, "BB, there is nothing we can do. Naruto is Raven's friend and has been nothing but kind to us. I am not going to bother him with questions. I don't care if he disassembled an assassin in a second, we shouldn't pry, that is not our business." Cyborg simply shook his head as he turned to face the location Naruto had assigned him. "But Sai, you don't understand, he isn't a normal person. He smells of smoke all the time and I don't think I have ever heard his heartbeat shoot beyond its normal rhythm, even when he was being attacked." They paused in front of a big warehouse and blinked. "Does he reside here?" Naruto decided to awaken from his enactment at that precise moment. Gazing out the window, Naruto nodded and muttered a curse as he watched them both get out of the car. "I will be right back, guys." Naruto nodded and released a small amount of heat, which caused the thermal lock to open. "Sorry man, you were just attacked, you could be in shock for all we know, and we are going to help you gather up your stuff." Beast Boy and Cyborg were taken aback when they entered the building. Was there anything this guy didn't do? When Beast Boy spotted a kitchen with a toolbox on the counter and 2 stairs leading to a bedroom, he followed Naruto. The 3 of them were the only people in the building when Cyborg released the sensor on his arm and looked around. Fortunately, he didn't want to destroy the blonde's house while battling shadow killers or anything similar. He went to the kitchen and examined the cookbooks that were stored there. English, Dutch, French, German, Italian, Japanese, Chinese, and a few he was unfamiliar with. He went to the bookshelves on the other wall and read the titles: Geography, History, Mechanics, Neurocircuitry, Meditation, Medicine, Weapons, Psychology, Pharmaceuticals, Theories of Life, and Mental Medicine. He thought, he must be quite a cook. He was unaware of the contents of some of the books. With a shrug, he moved through the living room. He picked up the blonde's notebook and skimmed through the information. There were some good ideas there, and perhaps Naruto wouldn't mind helping with the T-car while he was staying with them. He was apparently disassembling the engine and looking for ways to make it even stronger than it was. The engine was in pieces over his floor and coffee table. He noticed something that drew his attention as he was leaving. He could see a set of golf clubs, a small waveband radio, and an old canvas punching bag on a sawhorse with 2 bloody hand wraps next to it. The blonde liked sports, at least, and it appeared that he would be using the gym. Cyborg nodded in agreement. Beast Boy was packing his gym bag from Hammers, where he was offered a lifetime membership in exchange for sparring with the owner occasionally, when he heard the cyborg say they had to leave. Naruto took his time upstairs, gathering things and warning Beast Boy not to touch anything. With a nod, Naruto picked up another bag by the door, this one containing the uniform of his hellhound. Keeping a close eye on the man on the rooftop across the street, he turned to the door and locked it firmly. He had a feeling they would meet him sooner rather than later, but he was unable to turn and look closely. They drove in the direction of the tower, piled up on the rooftop next door. As their target drove off with 2 of the Teen Titans, the 4 figures watched. They would wait. They had plenty of time to test the blonde's mettle and challenge her. With a quiver on his back and a bow resting in his right hand on each thigh, the person in the lead was dressed in a dark blue uniform. Standing just over 6 feet tall and of average build, Merlin was a proficient tracker and one of the world's best archers. A black, swathed figure stood on either side of him, with a katana across their backs, a short sword on the back of their belts, and a shuriken on their thigh. They were his guards. Neither had been given a name in the league, but they both hoped to observe the archer in action. The lone female was the last on the roof. She had black hair that reached her shoulders and keen brown eyes that absorbed everything about her target, this so-called death. Despite being several inches shorter than the others, she was not to be ignored. The muscle of a coiled cobra lay beneath her exotic and alluring body, ready and able to perform any task she needed to. She was dressed in an Asian-style martial arts uniform with a long black leather duster. She was Lady Shiva and possibly the world's best female martial artist. With a British accent, Merlin said, "So Shiva, what do you think of him?" Their drone provided the coordinates, and the 2 had previously inspected the house in an effort to locate and test the blonde, but he had not been present. He obviously piqued the interest of both masters, but in a more sensual way. Shiva was drawn to this blonde who was unafraid of herself or other people, and she enjoyed his company. He is a disciple of a strong mind equals a strong body, and that to truly master both is a myth. Merlin nodded to his guard, and the group vanished into the night in a puff of smoke. I look forward to our encounter. It will be entertaining.
That's it for today. I hope you guys enjoyed this great story. See you in the next one.